The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Saturdays or Sundays, SOR Media, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of SOR Media is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced? Then come own the night with us.
Little brother has taken control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all
Station atop the mountains of British Columbia, live from SOR headquarters. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on Spaced Out Radio on iTunes. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio.
Brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We will expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized.
It's Wednesday, June 6th. Thursday, June 7th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. And this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. Hope you had a great day and night. I am your host, Dave Scott, live from the Great White North in the Caribou region on top of the mountains of central British Columbia, right here at the brand new SOR headquarters. We are 150,000 strong nightly on the SOR radio network, including the Fringe.fm. You can also check us out live on Periscope.tv every Monday through Friday night. Looking for our archives? Don't worry, they are free for you. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button when you go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to some Bumblefoot, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, read up on the Encounter online, or watch great videos from UFO Seekers, Contact TV, and so much more. It's Hump Day, space travelers. We're halfway to the weekend, and we got a power show tonight because I always love it when this next guest comes on. This man is a hero and an idol of mine in this field, and every time he comes on, I can say this: we're all going to be a little bit smarter. Tonight, we are honored to have as our guest for the full show, Grant Cameron. Grant is one of the best researchers in the world when it comes to UFOs, government conspiracy, and the current disclosure movement. Making his home in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Grant's quest to learn about UFOs started in the mid-1970s when he was an eyewitness to a strange craft nicknamed Charlie Red Star. Over the years, Grant's books, including his newest, Managing Magic, the government's UFO disclosure plan, All of Grant's books can be found on Amazon. I highly suggest you get them. They are full of information and detail, anything you want to know about the field of ufology. We're also going to talk about Xendras tonight. Don't know what that is? We're going to tell you, because the first I heard about it was a couple of months ago at UFO Con in San Fran. Would you step into a portal not knowing what's coming out of the other side? We'll get into it tonight. Grant Cameron, the man, the myth, the UFO researching legend. How are you, my friend?
Just fine, Mr. Dave, and I appreciate all the interest you show, and I acknowledge your expertise and your ability to put this thing together. I mean, how you can do this show for so many hours a week, I look up to you, man.
No, my friend, it's the other way around, you know. I mean, this is easy for me because, believe it or not, Grant, back in the old radio days, I was used to being on the air like 6-7 hours a shift. So this is pretty easy. So, 3 hours of talking, where I just shut up and let all of you guys with great information come on in. It's great. Have you recovered, Grant, from your Winnipeg Jets being knocked out of the playoffs?
Well, I was actually on the road when they got knocked out, so it was pretty big deal here. I mean, it's sort of like I always make the joke now when I'm lecturing. Like Winnipeg is kind of the city in Canada that not even people in Canada want to visit. So it's kind of like we're sort of feel a little bit left out here in the middle of the country, and so people were pretty pumped that finally something was happening in the city, and now they're complaining about the $1 million. It cost them for the parties in the street because all the people were in the street and stuff. But it was a pretty good run, so it was pretty exciting. And now I guess the final game may be tomorrow to watch. It's been a pretty good hockey season, even the last couple of series where it's pretty fast hockey. It's pretty good to watch.
I've been watching too, my friend, and it's going to grind my gears if Washington wins. I'm just not an Alexander Ovechkin kind of fan. I really am not. But I mean, he's one of those stars. I was starting to think he was like Dan Marino, where he was going to be the best of his genre, never to win a Stanley Cup, and now he's one win away. Makes me sick. But
the thing is, they've had I think it's what they said 3 times. They've been up 3-1 in the series and lost, so it may not be over yet. It's like Ovechkin's just famous for that. I mean, folding it, the whole thing folds. Man, how many times did they win the President's Cup and they absolutely folded when they get down there? But it's kind of interesting to see it all unfold. There was always the rumor. I don't know if you got it on the West Coast there, but we had the rumor that Trump when we were in the semifinals, that apparently Trump had the rumor was that Trump had maintained that there was going to be him and the head guy for the NHL, whatever his name is, Bettman, that there was a determination that the Canadians weren't allowed to win. So of course a lot of Winnipeggers figured that was why we lost, because it was they were complaining about the refs and all this kind of stuff. But you know how it goes.
I know how it goes. I'm a lowly Canucks fan, my friend. Yeah. A lowly Canucks fan.
Well, you had your party there a few years ago. You came within a couple of games of winning the whole thing. You had the people in the street and stuff. It gets pretty exciting when it's your team, and then you have to sell off all the players once you get a big sort of run. Then everybody wants 20 million, $10 million a year or whatever they want now. And you have to sell off all your good players, and then suddenly you're at the bottom of the league again.
Well, we could talk hockey all night long, but I think our audience wants to hear more about UFOs. And we're going to get into the UFOs right after this. And you're going to be with us for the full show, so thank you. Congratulations, by the way, on your brand new radio show that you will be doing on KGRA. I never thought I would see that happen, Grant, where a network was able to lure you over.
Yeah, well, the people have been trying for years, and then I figured my condition was that because I was doing a lot of stuff on YouTube. I have my assistant Desta, who you probably have knew about, came and sort of rescued me because my website, was sort of going down. There's just too much stuff to do. You have to do the website, you got to do the lecturing and the books and stuff. So she came in. She's much younger than I am, and so she offered to help me out. and she suggested I go to YouTube, and I started doing a lot of just short interviews with people on YouTube. And the condition with KGRA was that I would get to put it on my YouTube channel because I'm going to interview these people anyway. And I use a lot of the material, so then I can get somebody on to a show. Like if I were able to get somebody from To the Stars on there, and then I can ask them all the questions I want, and people are less reticent to avoid the question when they're on the air. So I figured it was an opportunity. I was going to do these interviews anyway. That there's a bunch of people I want to talk to, and I know I know a fair number of people in the UFO community. So that's when I figured I would sort of do it. And if we run out of ideas or shows or whatever, well, then I'll just go back to what I was doing. But to me, the big thing now is in this thing is these short YouTube videos that a lot of people, they don't want to, they haven't got the time. They're sort of like, they don't read that much anymore. And so that was something that I sort of got advice on that seemed to work out fairly well. And so we'll see how it goes. I mean, it's first show went fairly well, and I've got Danny Shin coming up and a couple other people that are pretty big. Plus, I got a guy that we may want to talk about tonight. I've got I don't know if you saw my YouTube channel. We've got a very high level guy in Hollywood that we said we're going to ride the horse till it dies. We're going to try to keep this guy's identity secret, but it would be sort of like saying we're dealing with one of the Kennedys or one of the Rockefellers. This is like a major figure in Hollywood. The guy's a full-blown experiencer. And so I'm going to bring him on the show and maybe bring him on every once in a while just to sort of update the thing. But there's a lot of these sort of interesting people that I want to sort of bring out.
And you know what? One by one, they will come out. I mean, that's just basically it. And, I mean, some of the people's names that I have heard off the record that are not only experiencers, but psychics. I mean, give you an example. I never knew Drew Barrymore was a high-level psychic in Los Angeles, has her own store front with, psychic readings by Drew and oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, names like that, I never really realized because, I mean, you're so used to seeing them on the silver screen or the television screen or even on stage, that you're just not used to it.
Yeah, well, the one thing I can sort of add to that is that, I do the whole right brain, left brain thing when it comes to psychics, experiencers, abductees and stuff. And I missed it when I went to Contact in the Desert. They had Patient 17, which was the sort of the movie that was done about Roger Lear's 17th patient. He did 17 people where he took out the alien implants. And they asked Roger Lear at one point, what's common between all of the people that the experiencers, contactees that you've dealt with? And he said they're all right brain creative people, and there's tons of them in Hollywood. So Hollywood would be kind of the place. It's almost like the last book I did was Tuned In, the Paranormal World of Music. And I go through all the musicians. And as I sort of joke, at one point I thought the intelligence behind the phenomena had every single musician. I thought every single one of them was, either seeing stuff or an abductee. And that fits in as well because musicians are sort of very right-brained and very outspoken. And whereas when I went to look at, I was doing where Bubba Watson golfs in Scottsdale, Arizona, my buddy wanted me to lecture there, and they actually put up sort of a fight. There was a bunch of people, and these are all like multimillionaire guys that really didn't want me to lecture there, and they were trying to stop this lecture from taking place, but it did take place. So I figured, well, I'll go in there and I'll sort of bring up some famous golfer who had a UFO sighting or claimed to have been abducted or something. I could not find a single golfer who'd ever had anything. And yet if you put in but if you put in musician into musician and alien abduction or UFO sighting or something like that, I mean, the screen just lights up. It's just unbelievable. It's just a very bizarre connection where for whatever reason, these sort of right-brain creative musicians, almost like what Roger Lear was talking about with experiencers. He said all experiencers are right-brain creative people, and the other thing that was common is that all implants on the left side of the body, which makes total sense to me when I heard it, because the left side of the body is run by the right brain. And so you basically have this situation where if you can shut down your left rational analytical brain, it sort of it allows you to disassociate, and your right brain basically taps into the universe and pulls back whatever it is. And this applies to musicians, artists, savants. It's a pretty clear-cut pattern to me.
Jamie Sexton, who comes on this show once a month doing what we call the Rebel Planet around here, alternative news. He is very highly involved in the music scene in Las Vegas, Texas, and in LA as well. And, you know, he said some names to me off the record that I can't put on the record, but people wouldn't believe some of the music recording artists who have had weird, freaky experiences from their own abductions or UFO sightings, Grant, to you know, for some reason, and Jordan Maxwell will touch on this as well, that musicians want to know all about these UFOs. They want to know all about what is going on, and they'll have like people come behind the scenes who will say, you know, I work for some defense contractor, and this is what I've seen, and they'll, you know, because they want to try and get in close to the musician and befriend them and everything, and they'll give up all this sorts of information. It's absolutely weird how that works when it comes to the music scene.
Yeah, and musicians are very sort of outspoken. A lot of them really don't really care what people think about them. They're, you know, there to be bad boys and that kind of stuff. So a lot of them are kind of outspoken about. It's actually surprising how many actually have come forward and talk about it. And there's some pretty big ones that haven't. But it's an interesting phenomena where I know the first book had been written by Michael Luckman, and he was friends with Michael Jackson and with David Bowie's wife, and he wrote the first book. And the reason I got it dragged into this, and this sort of ties into the Xendra thing too, is I've gotten, I guess, 3 times now messages from aliens, not from me, but from experiencers. And it was actually Chris Bledsoe, this sort of famous experiencer in Fayetteville, North Carolina, who I think now has a deal in Hollywood. He was trying to get a hold of me. He had all his people with him, script writers and stuff like that. He was in contact in the desert. I didn't meet up with him, but I'd known him since, I guess, 2012. We met at a big event in Philadelphia, and I got to know him fairly well. And he phoned me up. This would be about 2014 or whatever. And he interacts with beings that he calls the Guardians. And he said, they've got a message for you. And I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah, they want you to know that the message is in the music. And I went, oh, okay. But I think, Chris, you may be talking to the wrong person. I said, like, I don't play music. I don't play a musical instrument, nor do I care to. I've never listened to music. I never did listen, you know, not interested whatsoever. And he said, well, the one song you should listen to is Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. And I go, well, yeah, okay, Chris, whatever, you know. And then he said, oh, the other song you should listen to is After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. And I went, Neil Young? Are you kidding me, Neil Young? And he said, yeah, it was Neil Young. And I said, well, you know, because I live in Winnipeg, and I mean, it's not the most popular city in the world. And Neil Young grew up here. So, and that's one thing we know. We've had a few pretty famous musicians come out here, the Guess Who, and, you know, Bachman Turner Overdrive, and the Crash Test Dummies, and Neil Young was one. So then that was what dragged me down the rabbit hole. It's almost like everything that's happened to me in my UFO career is not something I've chosen. I've just sort of like synchronistically, something's dragged me down the rabbit hole. And this is another one. So I figure, oh, wow, I check this out. So I checked out the song. And if you know the lyrics in the last half of the song, it's basically the experiencer message. It's like, you know, the bombed out world, and the silver seeds, the flying saucers, they come down and take the chosen ones, which is what Yvonne Smith calls the experiencers, the abductees, and take them to another planet. And when I saw that, I was like sort of hooked. And I looked at the next song, and suddenly I had picked up all these various musicians. And then I read Michael Luckman's book, and then I was sort of hooked. I figured, like, there's something here. And I started to work on the book. And Michael Luckman was just more like looking at the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Presley and sightings they'd had and stuff. And I was more interested in why would they pick musicians, the consciousness aspect to it, like what's actually going on, why are these people being contacted. And so when I got going on it, then Michael Luckman contacted me and he said his first book was, I think, 330 pages or something. And then he said, I've got a whole bunch more people. I'm going to do another book, because I've got enough for another book. So he started another book on musicians, and because he was in the music industry in New York City, and he had a bunch more. And then I guess it would be about a year after that, I was still working on my book. And then suddenly I heard he had a stroke and died. So now I was trying to find his files. I figured, man, there must be another music book on musicians and the UFO phenomena that's floating around there. Someone's got his files, because he must have been pretty close to the end of that book when he had this stroke and died. But it's a pretty weird thing, but it does fit in to my sort of consciousness theory about how this all sort of unravels. And so I did that because I had earlier done the Inspired book, where I look at inspirations, because I had the download. And when I was in contact last weekend, I talked a little bit about a second download that I've never really talked about. With the download thing, when I had my download, I started looking at other people that had downloads. I figured, well, let's see if anybody else had a download. And that's when the first thing I came across was Paul McCartney and the famous song Yesterday, I think the most produced song of the 20th century, where he wakes up in the middle of the night and the song is in his head and the piano's in the room, and he quickly jumps up and, puts the song down, and then starts going around for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, I can't remember what it was, playing this song for people, and was absolutely convinced he had heard it somewhere, and it was just in his head. And so when I got on that, then I got into this whole thing about the fact that it's not just, UFO people that are tapped into something weird. You have, psychic phenomena, remote viewing, psychics, mediums. It's everything. And that's why I believe it's called phenomenology. It's not just UFOs. It's all this stuff is tied together. It's all basically all the same thing.
Right. I want to throw one more in there for you that's very interesting. Sammy Hagar.
Yeah.
If you listen to Van Halen's lyrics on I believe it's the 5150 album, Love Walks In, it's allegedly his, all the lyrics are written towards his contact experience with a seventh dimensional female.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I've seen him talk about the experience that he had, but I didn't know the 5150. I'll look that up, because that's there's actually so much material now that there may be another music book. It's just so bizarre. I mean, the stuff's coming in, and there's actually a woman in the United States who actually wants to do a video thing. She's sort of tied into what's his name, Stevie Wonder. She figures she can get Stevie Wonder. She's African American. Her sister-in-law is a famous African American singer or whatever. And so she wanted to do a whole thing of trying to track some of these major figures down and see if she can get them on camera. So it's kind of interesting when you see it. There's just so much material.
Well, just so you know, I'm sending this video with the lyrics on YouTube to you on Skype here, so that way after the show you can watch the lyrics and listen to the song at the same time. It's pretty amazing. Grant, one of the things I wanted to get into you tonight was at the UFO Con back in March, where I got to had the pleasure to have a couple of beverages with you.
Yeah.
It was one of those experiences that I never thought was happening, but it was the topic of Xendras, where people are going into a mass consciousness to try and create these portals, I guess is the proper word for it. I would love for it. I've been trying to track someone down to talk about this for the last couple of months. I knew you were coming on, so I said, screw it. I'm just going to wait for you.
Yeah. There are some. The one guy you may want to get on is a pretty good interview. Is Enrique Villanueva. He's in L.A. He can speak English. The problem with the Xendra thing is that basically it's a Latino phenomena. And I was even talking about this last week at Contact, is that if you look at through ufology, you see all these different patterns. Like, for example, the ghost rockets. I was in Sweden last month, at this big, huge archives of 300 collections of UFO material there. And I was talking to the guy who was running the archives, and he basically told me that that's a phenomenon, like the ghost rockets is basically a Swedish phenomena. All these ghost rockets is going into lakes, and they have all these different cases where they're trying to recover these things out of lakes. And it only happens there. The same as the Xendra thing basically only happens with Latinos, except now, and I'll get into it, there's now a group in New York City that's doing something that looks pretty similar to that. But again, this is one of these stories where I got a message from an alien. And so I've learned to say, well, you know, you never know whether it's actually coming from an alien or what the heck's going on, but I know enough to listen now. So what actually happened, it was a very bizarre story how I got into the Xendra thing, was I wrote the book Charlie Red Star back in 75, had my sightings in May. And as I tell the story, I wrote up all this small town called Carmen, Manitoba. I ran around, I talked to all these people, wrote this manuscript, and in 76 or 77, I guess, I tried to get this thing published, and nobody really wanted to publish it. And the local publisher told me basically get lost. And so I was kind of depressed with that, put the manuscript on a shelf, and gave it to my sister, and she held it for probably 20 or 25 years. And then she came back and she said, "Oh, you remember you gave me this?" And it was this bound manuscript. And I'm going, whoa, I didn't even remember sort of having read it. So what I did is optical scanning software came in, and I scanned this thing into the computer, corrected the errors or whatever. And then what happened was I got a phone call from a producer in Toronto who runs a sort of a TV network thing there where she produces children's programming and stuff. Fairly young girl. And she said, "Oh, can I read your manuscript?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess so." So I sent her the Charlie Red Star manuscript, and then she contacted me. She said, "I'd like to option the Charlie Red Star for a movie." And I said, "Yeah, okay, sure." And so then it was a small option deal. And so she told me what the deal was. She said, "Well, I want to do this movie, full movie on Mission Rama." And I tried to get it financed in Canada. I couldn't get it financed in Canada because it involves Peru, and nobody would touch it. So what I want to do is I want to take your story, this story about me running around Carmen, Manitoba, going to change me to a reporter. And this reporter will run around Carmen, Manitoba and investigate UFOs and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden he'll discover Mission Rama, and he'll head off to Peru, and that's how we can finance the movie. So I said, "Yeah, okay, whatever you want to do. I don't care what you want to do." And so she said, she'd contact me from time to time. She says, "We're working on the script." And then she got the script ready. She says, "Oh, we've got the script. Oh, do you want to read it?" And I go, "No, not really." I said, whatever you want to do. I don't care what you're doing with my stupid book. And so she had this thing all to go. And then she got sick and put this thing on a shelf, and was kind of because the Mission Rama, there's some fighting, there's some ego stuff going on in there. And the one of the brothers that started it was transsexual and became a woman. So there was all this sort of controversy behind the scenes, whatever. And so she put this thing on a shelf, and I sort of forgot about it as well. She stopped paying the option. So anyway, I got a friend, Katerina Costello, whose name is on some of my books. She was helping me, and she's originally from Colombia. And she was a legal secretary in Los Angeles. And she got into this Mission Rama thing. She said, "Oh, they're doing this meditation at Mount Shasta, and they're meditating for world peace. And you should come. This is fantastic." And I mean, I'm in the middle of the country. This is like a 40-hour drive for me to go to Mount Shasta, California. And I said, "Well, I don't know, Katerina, I don't know if I, and then she kept going. And then I thought, well, she helped me a lot with the book. She did the editing. She would post the books and stuff. Figured, okay, I'll support my friend. I'll drive to California, and I make the joke, I had nothing against meditation. I have nothing against world peace, but I really had never thought about sitting on a mountain up at 4,000 feet meditating for world peace. But I said, well, she wants to do it, so okay, I'll go to California and I'll drive there. So I get Desta, who's helping me here in Winnipeg now, with some of the stuff I'm doing. And off we go to California, and we're driving through Nevada. This is on Wednesday. The event starts on the Friday night. So this is Wednesday. We're heading for Reno. We're going to stop in Reno for the night, and then we're going to make the drive to Shasta. So we're coming across the desert, and all of a sudden Desta's phone rings, and she answers the phone, and it's Katerina. And Katerina says, "Oh, I got a message from Grant from Ann Terrell." And Ann Terrell is the alien. The mission Rama, it centers around aliens from the planet Apu, and they have a base supposedly on Ganymede, one of the moons of Jupiter. So this message comes in, and of course I've already had the message from Chris Blesso, and I knew that turned into a book. So all I said to Desta is, she sort of mentioned to me what the message was. I said, make sure, get exactly what the message is. Because the message basically was, Ann Terrell knows Grant's coming to the mountain, and there's going to be a program sighting on Saturday night, and Grant should let people know. So I knew I was going to put this on Facebook, and I knew this would get a real sort of backlash from a lot of people, like, are you crazy? What do you think's going on? Whatever. I said, make sure you get exactly what the message is, so I know exactly what the wording is. So this went back and forth, and then they gave me this message that I put up on Facebook. Now, the way it works in these Mission Rama groups, and the guy that was actually running it, I guess had been trained by Mission Rama, but he was no longer with Mission Rama. He was on his own. He was like a free agent guy or whatever. So he's there, and then there's this Enrique Villanueva that I told you would be a pretty good interview. He's across the road. And they really don't see eye to eye on some stuff. So they were having their group on their side, and it was English, and our side was all Latino. I had no idea what anyways. They're all talking Spanish. I have no idea what they're talking about, which I really didn't care anyway. But so we were there, and they have what's called a program sighting. So Mission Rama, the whole thing with Mission Rama and these Xendras, it's not so much the Xendras. The Xendras, they only open, every once in a while they'll open a Xendra. Most of their stuff is program sighting. So what they do is they have what are called antennas. And it's kind of an important term because the To the Stars Academy, their group that works on with experiencers also uses the word antenna. So they have these antennas, and what they are is people who are doing automatic writing. That's how it started in 1974, and that's why they wanted to tie it into my Charlie Red Star story, was that Mission Rama started almost the same time as when I had my first sighting. So what happens is, how Mission Rama started was, there was these two brothers, Sixto and Charlie Paz Wells. Both were, one of them, I guess it was Sixto, started to do this automatic writing thing. So he's doing this automatic writing, and it claims to be this alien from planet Apu. And he said, "Well, how do I know you're an alien?" And they said, "Okay, Saturday night at 8:00, 60 miles south of Lima, Peru. You be there, and we'll fly by." So, of course, the two brothers, and I think they took the mother. I can't remember who. There was a bunch of people went. And sure enough, 8:00, exactly on the nose, this thing goes flying by. And then they started taking people. They started taking friends. And it was the same thing all the time. It was this automatic writing thing. And it would tell them exactly, like to the minute, when these things would take place. So that's the thing. They call these people antennas. And they've recorded every sort of antenna message that has been recorded since 1974. They've got this huge catalog type thing that people have these things. And in each group, they'll have an antenna, but usually they have a couple of antennas. And they won't act on a message unless more than one of the antennas gets the same message in an automatic writing thing. So anyway, back to the story of me going to Shasta. So we get to Shasta, and they say there's going to be a program sighting, which means that some antenna has picked up the fact. And it was actually Ricardo Gonzalez, who was the guy running it. He had gotten a message from Ann Terrell, and there's going to be this program sighting, and I had heard it was going to be between 9 and 10 o'clock at night. So I go there, and I figure, and I knew they'd opened Xendras, and Xendras are these interdimensional portal things. And there was two major events that happened there in 2014, 2015. It involved Paula Harris, who's a good friend of mine, and I had actually got her to go public in 2015 when she first told me the story about what happened. So I knew that they might open these Xendras. And what they do is they have this sort of a protocol. So most of them are vegetarians. They don't eat meat, and they fast for the period of time before or while this thing's going on. So I go, okay, I'll play the game. So I'm doing the fasting and I'm doing the no eating the meat and all this sort of stuff. And I figure, I got this chance to go through the Xendra. I would rather have had Desta or Katerina go through, but I figured, okay, for whatever reason, I've been picked or whatever. I think they wanted some publicity, so they wanted something to happen so that I would go and spread the word as to what's going on. So I go there, and then I talked to Paul, and I'll get to this second. We went through the whole Xendra story. I'm actually there where this thing happened, but Saturday night, to let you know what happened Saturday night, we're sitting there. And it was freezing cold. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, I come from Winnipeg, but I didn't really dress properly. And it was brutally cold. It was just above freezing. And this is in the middle of August. So it's very hot during the day, but just above freezing at night. So we're sitting there, and all these people, there's about 150 people in a circle. And what they do is this meditation oming thing where their claim is that they've raised the vibration, and this allows sort of this opening where we raise our vibration, they lower their vibration, and then they meet in between. So they're doing this thing, and I knew it was between 9 and 10. So Ricardo's sitting basically one seat away from me, and so I'm watching him, and he's looking up at the sky, and he's looking at his watch, and he's sort of wandering around. All these people are doing this meditation and this oming thing, and it was all very spooky. Pitch dark, freezing cold, and all of a sudden this thing flashes above my head, and I look up, and I'm in a lawn chair, and I remember it was so high above my head that I thought I was going to flip the lawn chair over. So I wasn't, most of the time I wasn't looking up, but as soon as I saw this thing flash over my head, I thought, wow, this is going to be, it's going to sound real egotistical, because I'm going, my goodness, it looks like it's right above my head. And then I'm thinking, no, it's got to be above the group. It just looks like it's above my head. And then I'm looking up, and I go, no, the second flash took place. And I go, no, this thing's right above my head. It was just directly overhead. Like, as I said, it was so far directly back above my head that I thought I was going to flip the lawn chair. And there's lasers going up, and so watch. And I missed half the flashes. I missed the big one. Apparently, there was one flash there. I was looking down because it was so steep above my head. I was looking down, and there was this giant cheer went up because there was one apparently huge flash that took place. And some people estimated 7 to 8 flashes took place over maybe 20 seconds, but directly above. It didn't move anywhere. It was right above my head the whole time. And so it was pretty impressive. It was not, I'd rather have had a Xendra. But when I was there, so that event happened, and then it was later when I was talking, there was a PhD psychologist who's been trained at Columbia University, who was working with autistic children. I had an interview with her later. I was interviewing a bunch of people about these Xendras, and I was interviewing her. She had been through a Xendra in 2008 by herself. She had been called in the middle of the night, and she had gone through this Xendra thing, gotten these messages. And she showed me her message. This is a couple days after when I interviewed her. And when I saw this on paper, it just sent shivers up my spine. She shows me the paper, and she got the message on the Thursday, and it said 2133, which was 9:33. That's exactly to the minute when this thing happened. And apparently Ricardo had gotten 9:33 as well, because she said to Ricardo when this thing was happening, she tapped him as it was happening, and she said, take a look at your watch. And of course it was 9:33. So I had sort of, that was enough for me. I drank the Kool-Aid, and I was into this thing. But even before that Saturday night event, which happened like 9:33 at night, during that day I was with Paula Harris, and I knew that this Xendra thing had occurred. So I said, Paula, where did that Xendra thing happen? Where was that? She said, well, right over here. And she starts walking. And I got my movie camera, so I figure, okay, I'm going to film. So I start filming, and we're walking across this field, and it's quite a long walk. And so we walk across there, and she's talking while we're walking, and I'm filming, and we get to the spot, and she shows me where she's standing. She's saying, I'm at this little tree. I didn't go past this little tree. And so basically what happens is she's sitting there and she's doing the meditation, the oming, and this sort of stuff. And they get a message. This is 2014. They get a message from 6 different antennas that a Xendra will be opened that night. And they don't tell anybody that this is going to happen, but they know, Ricardo knows these 6 messages have come in. And then what happens is, and this is actually on film, it's actually on the internet, these 2 UFOs go flying by, everybody's all excited, and they're filmed together. It's in a tandem pair going across the sky. And they go sort of towards the forest where Paula had led me, and because there's this big open area. It's called the sand flats. Goes across the sand flats and towards this forest. And of course, everybody doesn't know there's going to be a Xendra, so they're all just sort of sitting there. And Ricardo knows, so he and this other guy head to the forest. And what they're looking for is sort of a bluish white mist that comes off the ground, and it's pitch dark. I mean, it absolutely, you can't see your hand in front of your face. It's just unbelievably dark. And so they go racing off to the forest, and they find, there's the stuff coming off the ground, and they look, and this Antarel alien is there. He's about 10 feet tall, and so they come back, and that's when they say to Paula, Antarel's in the forest. Are you ready? He wants you in the forest. And Paula just freaks out. She just loses it. And they sort of drag her out to the forest. And with the way these Xendra things work is that they allow 7 people at a time in these Xendras. So what you have is there's different types, but the one that was there in 2014, it's like fog. It sort of lights up the ground, and it's sort of like a mist coming off the ground in this pitch darkness, this bluish white mist. And it's coming up. And Paula told me this story. They lead her out there, and she really doesn't want to be a part of this thing. And they there's a bunch of women there. There's Ricardo's wife, Saul. There's a couple other women, and they all hold hands. And Ricardo tells them, you're to walk through the mist until you get to the other side. As soon as you're through the mist, you're to let go of everybody's hand. But do not let go of hands until you're through the mist. So these women all walk through this mist thing. And Paula said to me, this is 2015, she already told me this story. She said it was the scariest moment of her life when she had to actually let go of these women's hands. So as soon as they do, then suddenly they look, and there's this 10-foot tall being standing there with this sort of silver hair, with wearing, like, everybody described the same thing. Because I interviewed all the people. There was 7 people in the Xendra, and there was 3 people outside the Xendra who had the experience to this thing. So I interviewed almost all those people, and they all said the same thing. It was like a 10-foot tall being, very muscular. Everybody sort of described him like a swimmer, very, very muscular, in a bicycle suit, very tight, sort of fitting. They described it as a bicycle suit. Had sort of a medallion type thing on his chest and sparks coming off the medallion. And very stern looking, wearing boots up to his knees. I mean, the descriptions were all the same. And then these smaller beings, which weren't grays, but they were a little bit bigger than grays, and people described them to look like elves, like very happy looking, smiling, and they were playing hide and go seek behind the trees. They were sort of popping their heads in and out of these trees, and this big, tall, 10-foot alien is there with, I think, 2 other taller beings. So Paula describes this, and all the witnesses describe this, and the smaller ones, and these were seen in New York later, but they basically described them as everybody thought they were the engineers, that they were the ones, because they were running around with these iPad things, they were holding things that looked like iPads, and the Mission Rama people, or the people that were running this thing, sort of had the impression that these were the engineers, that these were the guys that opened the Xendra, because there's sometimes you'll hear descriptions of 3 UFOs flying over, beaming down, and creating the Xendra. So there's something that is used to create the Xendra. So I interviewed Paula, and then I started interviewing. She said to me, she was telling me, and I looked where she was. She was at this small tree. He was standing by this big, tall, straight tree. And I've got this on my YouTube channel. I've got these interviews with these witnesses at White House UFO. That's my YouTube channel. So she's standing at this small tree, And I said, well, where's he? He's at that big tree, that big, tall tree, straight tree there. And I look, and it's like, I don't know, 25 yards. It's not that far. And all the witnesses were standing there. And when she described what she had seen, then I said, well, what about the others? And she said, oh, most of them are here. I said, are you kidding me? Can we go interview them? So we go, and they're just scattering like rats. I mean, a lot of them didn't want to talk because their English wasn't very, very good. But I interviewed, I would say, at least half of these people. And basically, it was exactly the same thing, that they had been in this Xendra. They all described the same being. And the one guy, I even asked him, I said, so were you scared like Paula? He said, no, I wasn't scared. I've seen him before. I said, oh, you've seen him before? How many times have you seen Antarel? He goes, I don't know, 5, maybe more. I don't really count. And it was that kind of thing. It was like, and he was one of the guys that helped find the Xendra. So then I discovered there was one in 2000. There was 2014, 2015. And then, so I'm interviewing all these people and these 2 Xendras, and both of them had like 9 witnesses. This is not like one guy seeing. This is like, you can interview all these people who are inside the Xendra, and they're all telling exactly the same story. So I interviewed them, and then I'm coming down the mountain, going back to my tent site, and this woman comes up to me, and she said, oh, thanks for your little speech. I gave us some little 10-minute speech to the group or whatever, and thanks for that, and I appreciate it. And I've got a strange story. Can you listen to it? I said, oh, really? Would you tell it on camera? She said, you do that? I said, yeah, I think I'll do that. And so I turn on the camera. She starts telling me 2016. She's there, and there's no appearance. They get a message that there's not going to be an event. Somebody's watching. I can't remember what the deal was, but there was nothing. But she's coming down the mountain. She tells me this story. This woman's from Mexico, and she tells me the story about meeting Enrique, I think is the female, the one, she's the commander of the craft. And she's telling me this story about running into Enrique, this tall, and she's like, I don't know, 7, 8 feet tall or whatever, in the crystal store at the bottom in the city. And we were actually in this crystal store because Desta's big into crystals. We were wandering around this big, huge, giant crystal shop there. And she was describing how nobody could see her. Nobody was looking. Everybody's looking at their phones, or they were looking at crystals or whatever. And nobody noticed this huge woman walking around in this thing. So it was that kind of experience where I got that, and then I just got hooked. And I figured, well, holy cow, this is. I said to them, this is the biggest story I've ever done in 43 years. This is like unbelievable. I can't believe nobody's covering this story. And so I sort of saw it immediately, almost like with the music thing. I almost saw it immediately that this was my mission. My mission, because I'd never heard of this group. I'd never heard about these Xendra things. And it was because it was all in Spanish. It's all in Spanish. Enrique's about the only guy that really speaks pure English. All the rest of them, you need a translator to talk to them. And luckily I had Katarina who could speak Spanish, but so I saw my role was to get this story out to the English-speaking world. And that's actually when this program sighting thing took place over my head at 9:33, even the more bizarre thing happened right after it. So this thing's flashing, and Ricardo is standing up. All these people with lasers and stuff are looking at this thing. And then he sits down, and there's Katarina sitting beside me, and then Ricardo is sitting there. And his wife pulls out her cell phone, and she lights the cell phone, and he has this little tiny, it looks like a little black diary. He flips the diary open, and he starts automatic writing. And I had heard these stories. The Canadian government was using this automatic writing thing in the early 1950s to communicate with an alien. So I was familiar with it, and I knew that they used a woman that was famously this Frances Swan that the Canadians were in contact with in Elliott, Maine. She was using automatic writing. But this is the first time I'd ever seen anybody actually do automatic writing, and it was just so weird. And then I'm thinking to myself, why didn't I bring my camera? But of course, it wouldn't have made any sense because it was totally dark. I'm thinking, why don't I have my camera? Man, would I love to photograph? Because his hand was moving so fast. It was just so bizarre. He had this thing, and his wife is lighting up the book, and he's writing away. And all of a sudden, he starts going a little bit sideways on the page. And I said to Desta, I said, look, he's doing automatic writing. She says, no, he's just channeling. And I said, well, no, it looks like automatic writing to me. And his hand is going like a mile a minute. And then he starts going sideways. I said, Desta, look, he's starting to go sideways on the page. She said, no, it's just the way he's holding the book. I said, no, I think he's going sideways. And then he's going straight up and down the page. But he's holding the book, horizontal, but he's writing up and down on the page. It's just so weird. And going really fast and pitch dark, freezing cold. And then all of a sudden he stops and he closes the little black book and then he puts his head down like he's meditating. And that went on for about maybe 10 seconds. So I was like, boom, the book's back open again. And his hand is going like a mile a minute again. I'm going, why don't I have my camera? It was just so amazing to watch this go on. And then he went on for another couple of minutes and then he shut the thing. And then he got up and he read the message that he'd gotten. And one was from Enrique, this female. That was the second one. It was a shorter one. And the first one was from Antarell. And Antarell had said, we knew Grant was coming and he didn't see us, but he doesn't need to see us. And he'll know how to put the pieces together. And there was something. Oh, and then he said, it's all connected. And that's the name of my publishing company. And I'm going, either Ricardo did some research or that was pretty amazing that they got because that's my whole belief, is that it's all connected. It's all one. That's the basic message. Everything's connected. There is no time and space. There is no sort of aliens. It's all the same thing. It's just all consciousness. And so when I heard that, I was just sort of floored. And then they brought up this thing about nodes in this message. And Desta, we'd actually done a book with Desta, where she had all her channeled messages. She was getting all these bizarre channeled messages. And I would ask her questions, ask him this, ask him that. And they had actually taught her how to do it. She had done some training and couldn't get it right. She'd taken courses on, channeling and on automatic writing and stuff and really couldn't get it right. And then at one night they actually said, this is how it works. And they just took her mind down. She could feel her mind going down. And from then on, she could do this. So we took all these messages, and part of the message in this thing after this flashing thing over my head was talking about nodes, the connection of these nodes. And I remember as soon as I heard that, I looked at her, I said, did you hear that? Because she had this one whole channeling session was on nodes. So I was just floored. And then so I started looking at all these other Xendra cases. And that's when I found there had been one in 1994 where a 747 airline pilot went through. And I haven't put it on my YouTube channel, but I actually interviewed the guy. And he's a 747 airline pilot. He's retired now from United Airlines. And he talks about going in through a Xendra. And then I found out there was this psychologist, 2008, she'd been through a Xendra. Then I discovered this one. You can actually find it on YouTube if you put in 2009 Xendra Uruguay. There's a Xendra there that appeared for 2 days. 125 people went through the Xendra, and I'm going like, man, this is the most amazing story. So I started looking, and there's been a number of these Xendras opened around the world, and I was just fascinated because a lot of them, they have like 49 witnesses, 125 witnesses. This is not some small story, and this is a thing where you either go into this thing, and a lot of people will describe not really seeing anything but getting a message. And that's what happened to Paula in this second event, 2015, where she's in there. They're all looking at this alien, this 10-foot alien, but they're all having separate experiences, which may be what the whole let go of people's hands was. So Paula heard the guy talking, and it was in some language she couldn't figure out what he was saying, except for the last words where he said, thank you. And the other women were getting messages, so I've got all the messages, but it was like 7 people having independent experiences, almost like they're in there by themselves. And so that's the whole sort of Xendra thing, and I'm starting to put it together. And then what I discovered is that there's actually a group in New York that I've just run into. This is, I don't know if you've seen this guy. He's got a YouTube channel. It's called Alien Protocols, and I did an interview with him on my White House UFO YouTube channel. And he got halfway through, and all of a sudden he started talking about these things. And he doesn't have the word for it, but he's talking about these things with the bluish white fog, and this being comes out, and he's got sparks coming off his chest. And I'm going, yeah, I couldn't believe it. I mean, it's like whether you read something I wrote about it, but they had 7 witnesses. I've only talked to him. I said, I need more witnesses. I need some other people who were there when this thing opened up. And I said, well, how many times you opened these things up? And he said, 4 times. And then but they've always freaked out because it's almost like the UFO sighting. That people think, if I got there, I'd walk up to the ship and I'd talk to the alien or whatever. And he said no. And this is my experience when I had one sitting right over top of the car. Is you say, well, I'll walk up to it, but there's whether it's a thing that they put off or whatever. But when I had the thing over the car in '76. I mean, that was the scariest moment of my life. I can never remember being that scared. It was just terrifying. And yet all it was this thing coming towards the car and hovering over the car. And he described the same sort of thing, like nobody could move. This thing was coming out, and as soon as they sort of closed their eyes and then opened their eyes again, it was all gone. It had faded away. So they're going to do one in a couple of weeks, this Alien Protocol guy. And I'm trying to convince my people on the East Coast for somebody to go. So I've got an actual sort of witness that I can trust, who I know, and to see if they can open one of these things in the Hudson Valley. And then I ran into this Hollywood guy, and he claims they're opening in his house. So suddenly I've got all these other things, but basically it's a Latino phenomena. It's basically all Spanish, and that's why most people have never heard of them. We in here call them portals, but they call them Xendras, and there's 4 different types of Xendras. And so I'm writing a book on that to just detail these different Xendras. Yeah.
I cannot wait. I have felt so much pull to these Xendras. One of these days, I got to try and figure out how to get down to one. But Grant, I'm going to get you to hold on here because we are going to go to our first break of the night. Grant Cameron is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. He will be speaking at this month's Alien Cosmic Expo in Toronto, the ACE conference, the weekend of the 23rd. So if you're on the East Coast and you can make your way up to Toronto, you can watch Grant, amongst others, Kathleen Martin, Stanton Friedman on his second to last tour to take part at the ACE conference. I highly suggest you do. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back right after this.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
The freedom to post what you want, when you want. That's the social media freedom you need. Social Media Freedom is the free app in your app store. No need to worry about going to jail or being shadow banned any longer. It's the freedom to say what you feel. The freedom to know Big Brother isn't watching. It's the way social media is supposed to be. Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free. Download from your app store today.
Coming September 28th to the 30th, it's our first annual Caribou Paracon, put on by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. 3 days of paranormal, supernatural, and spiritual knowledge in the beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Tickets are $150 Canadian for the event, being held at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Come watch our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and more. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
Hey Space Travelers, it's Joe Roop, your host of Spaced Out Saturdays. Come join me as we explore the realms of the paranormal, the esoteric, and everything in between every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. You know the truth is out there. Don't get caught sleepwalking. Come join Spaced Out Saturdays. That's every Saturday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, right here on SpacedOutRadio.com.
Hi there, this is Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm going to take you for a ride every Sunday night on Spaced Out Sundays. I'm going to set up your week with some strange tales from across North America, from psychic readings, Sasquatch, UFOs, to the most haunted locations. Come join me at SpacedOutRadio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, and let's get weird together. I'd love for you to join me. Spaced Out Sundays at SpacedOutRadio.com.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for some great nightlife? The Moose Vancouver is the place to be. Catch a game on one of the big screens or just come rock out to your favorite 80s and 90s hair bands. Great food starting at $6.95. The Moose Vancouver is open until 2 a.m. nightly. It's easy to find near the corner of Nelson and Granville. The Moose Vancouver is the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over Spaced Out Radio Night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back for the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Tomorrow night on the program, we're going to talk Canadian ufology. Victor Vigiani is going to join us tomorrow night. He is also speaking at the ACE Conference, the Alien Cosmic Expo, the weekend of the 23rd in Toronto, Ontario. So if you're on the East Coast, go to this event. You're going to want to go to this event. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network, including the Fringe.fm. You can also watch us live every Monday through Friday night on Periscope.tv. And our YouTube channel is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to some Bumblefoot, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, read up on the encounter online, or watch great videos from UFO seekers, Contact TV, and so much more. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Each thiocoprolite is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Grant Cameron is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. He is probably the most prolific researcher when it comes to UFOs these days, and you can get any of his books on Amazon.com. Grant, thank you so much for doing this. Your website, presidentialufo.com, is Grant's website if you want to check it out. Grant, you have such a lot of speaking engagements coming up. Not only the Alien Cosmic Expo, which is Canada's largest, but you're also going to be speaking in Vancouver soon as well.
Yeah, that's the Architects of the New Paradigm Conference, and Steve Bass is going to be there. Victor is actually going to be there too, and he's going to be hosting or emceeing a disclosure panel. And I said, well, you may have to fight with Steve Bassett, who's going to be there as well, because we did a disclosure panel in Contact in the Desert, and there was about 8 people on the panel, and Steve was emceeing the whole thing. And then he was saying, as going along, he says, man, I love this, man. It's like, so he may have to fight with see who's going to run the thing with Victor, because they both do the same sort of thing. But yeah, there's going to be a panel there, and of course Danny Sheehan and George Norrie is going to be there, and Richard Dolan and Tom Danhauser, who's Norrie's producer, is going to be there. So it's going to be kind of an interesting conference there as well. It's just a one-day thing, but hopefully Vancouver. I think the last time I was in Vancouver, that was I can't remember what the tour was called, but they went across Canada. I think there was like 250 people or something. So Vancouver's got a pretty good audience for UFOs. So hopefully it'll work out well, because that's the first time I've ever run that conference in Vancouver. And I guess if it goes well the first year, it'll build from there on in.
Well, I look forward to it. I'm actually going to make the drive down for that weekend, because I definitely want to catch you guys and come in and say hello. And it's going to be a great time. And one of the names that a lot of people aren't familiar with, especially on the panel, is Johnny Enoch, where around here he's a little bit of a hidden celebrity, because he helped us start Spaced Out Radio back in 2014. So, you'll really enjoy him, and he is just a very gracious, humble guy. You'll really enjoy him. I hope you take the time to say hello to him as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you like the conference circuit? You just did Contact in the Desert. You still enjoy that, Grant?
Actually, not that much. Well, it has its ups and downs like everything else. I mean, the travel, I don't know if I really enjoy it. Like, I was just in Europe for 2 weeks, and even though it was sort of nice when you've been, in a hotel, out of a hotel, moving around with people, doing different events, it becomes like work. So I would say, sometimes I'd rather not travel, but the thing is, you get these big events where you're meeting people, and it's very high vibration. You're talking to people, and you pick up an awful lot of stuff. Like, we even have these sort of the rabbit hole deals that we do there, where everybody gets together in a hotel room. We did that in Eureka Springs. So Desta's got the camera, and I said, just set up the camera and start taping. And we're in Linda Howe's room, and there's Forrest Crawford. If you've never interviewed Forrest Crawford, he's an interesting guy. He was in there, and then I was there. And it was like, how you and I did it when we were the last conference we were together. You sit in a hotel room and you just sit there and yak, and the camera's running, and you realize the camera's running, so you don't say anything stupid or whatever. But everybody just talks, and we filmed this thing for like 4 hours, and we're putting up little segments. Linda's talking about metal, working with help put off on the metals and stuff like that, and we're sticking up little segments of this rabbit hole thing. So that's where I enjoy the conferences. You get that. Or, as I was describing, I think before the show, I'm at Contact in the Desert. which was a little too exclusive for me. It was in just this unbelievably exclusive resort thing there. I sort of felt out of place. But when I'm heading back to the airport, they give me a driver, and we're talking. And unfortunately, he started only revealing this as we were getting near the airport. But because it's a long drive, maybe 30-minute drive to the airport, we're driving along, and all of a sudden he said, "Oh, I'm an engineer." And he said, "I work for Joe Firmage." And I went, "You work for Joe Firmage?" Because I've been chasing Joe Firmage for, at least the last year, trying to find out what is Joe Firmage doing. Because there's always this thing that Ron Pandolfi, I chased around Ron Pandolfi, have for 20 years. And Ron is always putting out this rumor that there's a portal. And the story was that Joe Firmage has this portal technology in Salt Lake City, and he's testing this technology, and he's got it perfected. And even Ron had told this joke to a guy named Kevin Albert. And Kevin had told me that Ron told him, when you go to Firmage's place, he'll want you to go through his portal. Don't go through. You may not come back. And so I'm trying to find this Firmage thing, but it's sort of like all the Pandolfi stories sort of fall through where they turn out like it really wasn't what it was supposed to be, or it's like all, riddles, and nothing ever goes anywhere. So I couldn't figure it out, and I'm talking to people in Salt Lake City, and then I said, does Firmage have a portal? And then these people would come back and say, "Oh, he's got legal problems. The police are chasing him. He's got funny financial problems. He's a crook." And I said, "I don't care. I don't care if he's a crook. I don't care if he's, because I know he has been 3 impaired drinking charges, or like 2 or at least or something. So he's got these kind of things." I go, "I don't care. I don't care if he's got legal problems. All I want to know is, does he have a portal?" And nobody could answer the question. And I'd go every aspect I could. And so then suddenly I'm in this car with this guy who says, "I'm Joe Firmage's working for Joe Firmage." And I go, "You are?" And so then I start asking questions. And as I was describing to you, I mean, he was describing exactly what they're doing. And it was like way over my head. And all I can really sort of recall now is that it's got to do with energy. It really didn't seem to, although there may be something, but it didn't seem to have anything to do with portals. It has to do with energy, get us off the oil grid, and it's got to do with reducing inertia to zero. I remember that part. And there was something about gravity, something about all energies the same. Even gravity, like there was another guy in the car, and he said, "Well, what do you think gravity is?" He says, it's all the same thing. It's like all the different types of stuff. It's all the same thing. And so then I asked him the question about, because if you've gone to Joe Firmage's site, as I said, I was into downloads, big time into downloads, that the material you get in this present world, your rational analytical mind really doesn't get you very much of anything. But if you can disassociate, if you can shut down the left rational analytical mind, go out into the field, the Akashic field, higher consciousness, whatever you want to call it, all the answers are out there, and you can bring these answers back. So some people can disassociate, almost like a musician, go in there, bring back a song, and it'll be the best song you've ever done, stuff like that. And so Joe Firmage had this experience where a being comes into his room. He's this big .com executive, head of this $2.5 billion company in the 1990s, computer company, brilliant engineer. And he has this experience in the middle of the night where this being, which is like sort of like an angelic type human being, and it may be in relation that he's a Mormon. So this being comes into his room, and they're on this thing about space travel. And he said he'd like to go to space, and then the being says, "Why should we help you?" And he said, "Because I'm willing to die for it." And he actually has this on his YouTube channel. He only has about 7 videos on his YouTube channel. That's one of them, telling this vision. So I asked the engineer, I said, "Well, did he pick up anything? Is this coming from that vision that he had back in the 1990s or whatever?" And he said, "Well, yeah." He said, I said, "Well, what did he get?" And he said, "Well, basically it was that he was taught how the inside of an atom works." And so they got into this whole thing about exactly at this sort of like a quantum level, exactly what's going on. The energy's all there, and it's the ability to move this energy, put it down a wire, And if you can get rid of the inertia, well, then you can, like 3 seconds from one point to another point on the earth, you can just, because you can get rid of the inertia. So that's the kind of thing when I go to conferences, you run into those kind of events where you, like you and I mean, you sit in a room and you rap with someone until 2:00 in the morning or whatever. And that's where you pick up a lot of stuff, because I generally don't go to a lot of the lectures. And then you're always worried about giving your lecture and be prepared for your lecture and stuff. So it has its ups and downs. I've done a lot this year. I probably won't do that many this year. This year I've got quite a few. I'd say at least 12. And you come home, you're only home for a couple of days, and then you've got to go again, and you fly off somewhere else. But I sympathize with the people who run the conferences, because I know how much money you can lose on one of these conferences if it doesn't go well. So I'm always sort of a little nervous when I come to make sure you do a good job, because you know that whoever is running the conference has usually a lot of money sort of on the table to make sure this thing works out well. So what I'm starting to do now, and I guess you do the same thing, is I try to sort of interview the people going to the various conferences, because what I actually have, I found. For example, Paula Harris's conference she has a conference in November in Laughlin, Nevada, which is a very nice place. You can get a hotel, the one next door to where the conference is. I think you can get for like $25 a night, and these are like top line rooms. It's a very, very cheap place, and she runs it, and she'd bring in 18 speakers, and she's always she's like, early 70s, and she's just living on Social Security, and she's trying to run this conference. And she's bringing in all these European speakers, because she's European. She lived in Italy for many years. And I said, but Paula, I mean, even I don't know who these people are. I mean, they may be super genius type people, but if they don't know who they are. So what I offered to do is interview these European people for her. And I just did one this morning. With Brigitte, who was involved with the Atacama being. She was one of the main people in there that was with Greer and with all these people when they took the samples. She's good friends with the guy who has the Atacama being and stuff. And I talked to her about these Bosnian pyramids, which I've never been into ancient, sort of like the Von Daniken type stuff. But when she started talking about these Bosnian pyramids, I go like, wow, I think I'd like to go see this. It's like all these underground tunnels and the beings that were appearing. She saw a being. Lots of people have seen these beings in these tunnels and the orbs and stuff like that. And I'm just like, wow. I said, I mean, is there any documentaries? And then she sort of goes like, and then I was totally clued out. She said, just go on the internet. There's just like piles of them. I mean, it's just like, I can't remember how many hundreds of thousands of people they have working there. All these volunteers coming from around the world to work at these 5 Bosnian pyramids, and they're like way bigger than the pyramids, the biggest pyramids in the world. And it's just a fascinating story. So that's the thing, is I'm trying to help out some of the conference people, is to do interviews that I put on my YouTube channel, so that people at least know who these people are. Because it's fine to bring in someone with a $1,500 ticket from Europe, but if they don't speak English very well, and if nobody in America knows who they are, they're going to go, I don't care who these people. You got to make these people known. So that's what I try to do for these conference people, because I really do sympathize with somebody who has to produce 200 people and fill a room in order to pay for their expenses.
It seems like more and more of these conferences, Grant, are popping up day by day, and you are going to be actually participating in our first conference here in the end of September. And I got to tell you, we are so excited to have you come up here and do this. I know it's going to be near the end of your schedule for the touring year, but is it different for you speaking in the United States, being a Canadian, than it will be in speaking in front of a Canadian audience?
Well, the United States is different because you can't really, it's always scary to go across the border. You can't take books. There's always a chance you're going to sent back, because I did get sent back in 2005, and that led to 2 years of, being flagged, having the computer go off every time we went through the border, being caught, screened every single time, being pulled from the line and stuff like that. Kind of a harrowing experience for 2 years. So, and most of the conferences in the States happen in California. I mean, if you go to the East Coast, there's the New Jersey. I'm not even sure if they're doing the New Jersey conference anymore. They used to do the Pennsylvania conference, but since Ventre got into all that trouble, I'm not sure whether that's even going now. California is just like huge, and this Contact in the Desert, I don't know, it was 4,000 people or something. It's just like massive. Or Consciousness Life Expo in LA is, somebody said, 25,000 people. Just these huge events where the Californians and the Westerners seem to be more into it. The Canadian one, it really didn't start till 3 years ago. Like, you're doing your first one, Vancouver's doing their first one. Toronto's only been, this is maybe their third year, fourth year, maybe, no more than 4 years. And for years and years and years, there was no conferences in Canada. It was all basically an American phenomenon. I don't know why that is. So Toronto has worked out pretty well, and I'm not sure how Vancouver will do, but I encourage people to go like your area or to Vancouver, is because it's a beautiful country. I mean, if you're going to go to a conference, it's because sometimes people will take along their wife, and the wife really isn't too much into to UFOs. But if you've got beautiful scenery around, then it's not so hard to talk someone into coming along with the crazy guy who's into UFOs. And that's what happened at this Contact in the Desert. They used to have it at Joshua Tree, and it was like you're in the middle of nowhere. There's like four buildings where the lectures are taking place, and then a small building where the food is. And I felt sorry for these people, because it was like, when the time I was there 2 years ago, it was like 105 degrees, and these people are walking around in this. There was no really shade or anything like that. And this time they had it at this sort of like the golf club, this exclusive resort thing in Indian Springs, California. And it was unbelievable. It was terribly expensive for the rooms, but absolutely beautiful with this massive pool and all this kind of stuff. So the families would be good that if you're the crazy old man's going to UFO stuff, then the wife and the kids can use the pool and stuff like that and sort of enjoy it. So, the American it's a different world than Canada. Canada is starting to catch on now. So you guys have two on the West Coast there, and the one in Toronto. But other than that, in Canada, there really is nothing. There's no conference stuff. It's not like in the United States. You almost need like a sort of a major hub where you're near a big city, or people can drive in there. Because if you're sort of like in Winnipeg or somewhere like Minneapolis or something, it's a long way for people to come in. And usually conferences are sort of very regional, that the people from in around the conference site is where you're going to get them, like Eureka Springs, Arkansas. A lot of people, I always say this is one of the best conferences you can go to, and most people don't know anything about it because it's in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. But if you go there, there's like, I don't know, 800 people, or it's just huge numbers of people there. And they're all coming from Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, in that very sort of direct area. And once you get a conference going, your first year might be a little rough. Eureka Springs has been running for 31 years. And basically, if you go there, it's the same. Some of these people have been going for, 20, 25 years. They've gone every year, where once you get going, you get sort of a regular following. And then you just add on to that, and the numbers start to grow. So hopefully in Canada we can get a number of these conference areas where it works out, and people know you can go there and it's beautiful scenery, or you got something else to do. Like where you are, like I was so interested in yours because I'm big into Barkerville Gold. I've got a lot of shares there. I've always watched that whole Barkerville thing for many years, and so you guys are pretty close to Barkerville, and I'm thinking, well, man, I got to rent a car. I got to go over to Barkerville. That's sort of on my bucket list. I got to go see this place, even though the shares are really down now. But it's like a fascinating place. I've always thought about going.
Well, you know what? We should actually schedule you to come in a few days early, Grant, because David Weatherly and Ross Allison, I believe, are coming in a few days early, so we can actually take a drive up to Barkerville. Yeah,
because that's the cool thing, where they do the panning of gold and stuff like that, and And it's just kind of, it's sort of in the back of my mind. The other place I liked was Revelstoke. These are the sort of the two places in the BC that I always, I remember going through Revelstoke when I was very young on a Greyhound bus. I was 18 and I got one of these passes. I think it was like $75 for a month. You could drive on the Greyhound bus, and I went, and when I got to Revelstoke, I went, wow, man, would I love to live here. It's just so beautiful that I always tell people that, unless you've been to BC, you just can't imagine. It's not like Colorado is nice, but it's there's no way it compares to BC. So I try to encourage, like the Americans when I'm down there, is like, if you're going to go up to a conference, these are one of the places you should go because it's just absolutely beautiful scenery. You're going to go. Eventually, a lot of people will, especially in Canada, will go to Vancouver at some point during their life just to see it and go through the Rocky Mountains. But it's quite an opportunity, I think, for you guys there with the beauty of the scenery to put these things on, and hopefully it works out really well, and it'll grow from the first year on. And but you guys are doing more than UFOs, right?
Yeah, we're doing a little bit of everything. We got some paranormal people coming up, and we're getting into dowsing and spirituality, numerology. So it's going to be a real Heinz 57 of topics, but on the flip side, it's going to be a lot of fun and entertaining. Yeah.
Wow. I may have to bring Desta, because Desta's a dowser. She's into all that sort of stuff. In fact, she's always working on this stuff. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing, and that's what I say. It's all connected. It's all. That's why I called the book "Managing Magic" with the whole UFO cover up. It's not just UFOs that they're covering up. It's the whole paranormal, the psychic phenomena, that it all fits together. And so you're on the right track of linking all these things together. And a lot of people who are into UFOs are into all this other stuff. They know what it's all about. I mean, they're like a lot of experiencers. You'll say, they'll sometimes say to me, "Oh, I had this experience, but it was sort of a dream. I don't know if I was really abducted." And then I'll say, "You ever have anything else weird happen in your life?" And they go, "Oh yeah." And they'll start talking, about the ghost and the this and the poltergeist, and they'll go through their whole life with all this bizarre stuff. It's just like it all ties together. So to me, it's all the same thing.
Are you sick of Disclosure yet, or Confirmation?
It's a story I hate. I talked about this, and it's such a how would you describe it? It's such a lot of infighting, really ugly. If you saw the whole thing, when I was at Contact, I was on the panel, and I was sitting beside Richard Dolan. I'm at the far right hand side, and Peter Levinda is on the far left hand side. And there's about 8 people on his panel, so he's a long way down the table from me. And Dolan sits down beside me, and he says, "Oh, I see they got you and Levinda at opposite ends of the table," and he sort of laughs. And so what happened was Tom DeLonge had come forward, and somebody had posted him something about me and whatever. And so he came on Facebook, and he said, "Well, Grant's got good intentions, but he's not in the loop, and he's posting major inaccuracies, and we're trying to clean it up, and I'm not running the show, and my ego's in check." So I realized, he was a little upset about my ego comment, because I say, if you're going to be in this business, you got to have a little bit of ego, and that's what they do. They feed the people with the ego who think that they're here to, save the world or bring disclosure to the world or whatever. And I guess he's a little upset about that, but that sort of stirred something up. And even Linda came to me. Linda Howe said, "What is going on?" I said, "What do you hear?" Like it was like a big thing at Kong, and it was like all these people talking about stuff. I guess people have been talking about me or through him, or I don't know, and I never heard any of this stuff. And I'm going, well, what's being said? It was like, to me, it was just like he made this comment, and I immediately posted back. I figured it was like a Trump tweet. It was like, how can you be so stupid? They're going to take your stupid computer away from you and say, no more Facebook, 1 year. Like, we're taking your computer away, because he was basically supposed to be in the background and let these other guys run the operation, and then you suddenly stir it up like it's all secret. You can't talk to him. And so then he takes this shot, and it just opens it up. It's like, okay, here we go. Answer this, answer that. And then, of course, he goes silent again. But that's what I found the Disclosure thing. It's very sort of, it's kind of an ugly story, or it's like a story, like when I'm chasing around the Pendolfis, or Ron Pendolfi. And I always describe it as like the Wizard of Oz. I mean, the stuff he says, like he called, well, I'll mention that in a minute, but he had a new name for me. But to him, I say he acts like the Mad Hatter. I mean, there's just nothing you can really believe of what he's saying. It's just like crazy city, and so it's like you're in the Alice in Wonderland, and you're sitting there waiting for the caterpillar smoking the water pipe to come out of the shadows, and I'm looking for the door. I got to get out of this story. I said at Contact, and it's true. There's not a day goes by I don't try to figure out how to get out of this story. It's not like consciousness is very sort of uplifting, all this kind of stuff. But the disclosure thing is very political. It's infighting. It's just an ugly sort of thing. But I keep getting dragged into it because what happened is I had started this many years ago. Like Peter Levinda had made some sort of comment. He was going to Contact in the Desert. He was making this speech and he was going to take on all the people. And he mentioned my name. I don't know what he said. I didn't dare go in the room, but all these people that are sort of not treating to the stars properly or putting out inaccuracies or whatever. And he had said this thing about these, these people who are newcomers or Johnny-come-latelys or something and it's like, what are you talking about? I mean, he's only been in it for 3 years. I've been in it since 1977. That's when I first chased the Canadian government, the high-level officials. I flew to Ottawa and met with Merle Smith. She was secretary to the Speaker of the Senate, and as secretary to the Speaker of the Senate, and she was married to Wilbur Smith. And she started telling me this whole story about the upper level government and this inner group working for the Canadian government and what they were doing and all this kind of stuff. So I've been at this since 1977, and it's always the same thing. You're trying to file documents. You're fighting with agencies to get documents. You can't believe there's putting out disinformation, information, nothing. It's all smoke and mirrors, and you're trying to piece this thing together. And the only reason I got back in it this last time, I was out. I was doing the consciousness thing, and I got back in it because suddenly in 2016, Tom DeLonge comes forward just before he publishes The Secret Machines, Chasing Shadows, and suddenly he comes out and says, I'm dealing with all these insiders from the government and all this sort of stuff, and they're all telling me what's going on. I'm going like, wow, man, I've seen this before. And I mean, in fact, I've seen this lots of times before. Because I was with Bill Moore when he did the MJ-12 thing. I was good friends with him. He actually sent Kit Green, who's into the stars. He actually sent Kit Green to go and talk to this major witness I had at Penn State University, the former president, Dr. Eric Walker. And so it's the same characters cycling through there. And I was with Bill Moore. Then I was with Robert and Ryan Wood when the MJ-12 documents, the new MJ-12 documents, 3,700 pages, when they came forward. I'm the main person with the Bob Emmeniger story about the 1970s when they dropped this documentary in the 1970s called UFOs Past, Present, and Future, and leaked a bunch of stuff there. So I've seen this leaking from the government, how they put this story out for many years. And that's the only reason I did the Managing Magic, to talk about Tom DeLonge and all this stuff, is that I was pointing out to people, I mean, they've been doing this since 1947. The first one they did was Kenneth Arnold. The first guy had the first UFO sighting. They approach him and give him a bunch of UFO photographs and from the 4th Air Force and convince him these are real UFOs. And they look like gun camera footage. They were just close-up photos of flying saucers on black and white 8x11s. And so they've been doing this all along. That's the only reason I did the first book, Managing Magic. And now, because it's sort of, once Tom DeLonge had the news conference in October, and once they did the December 16th New York Times, Washington Post political thing, and it all sort of exploded, and I got some contacts sort of indirectly. Now I'll do another book, and it's about half done. I'm just waiting for the rest of the stuff to develop. And even tonight I had a phone call that described some of the stuff that may be happening. But try to put it all together because it's such a mishmash of facts. Nobody can figure this thing out. And so what I try to do is be the guy who, if you come to me, I'm going to tell you exactly what's going on. And as Tom DeLonge says, I'm not in the loop to the stars, so I'm posting accuracies. And my response to that is very simple. I mean, you got the government, And if you don't have a security clearance, then you're going to have to extrapolate on the little bit of data that may leak out from people. And if you're not inside the To the Stars Church, well, then again, you're in another loop you're not in. I didn't sign a non-disclosure agreement or whatever. And so I'm going to extrapolate on a little bit of data. I'm dealing with 2 levels of secrecy where I have to try to figure it out. But when I say something, you can be sure that I'm saying it. There's nobody telling me to say whatever I'm saying. I'm trying to give you the best evidence I've got of what's actually going on.
What I heard from a couple of people that we talked to who were at Contact in the Desert was that a certain nighttime host who was emceeing was actually pretty shocked that the crowd started booing when the word or the name To the Stars actually came up a couple of times from him.
Wow. I'm kind of surprised. I don't know what kind of audience they got. There was a fairly big thing at, they had this disclosure panel, and I know Lavinda got the first question, and it was basically, okay, so what are you doing next? What's the delay? And he basically, I don't know if he's supposed to say it, but he basically said the government is running it, because before they were saying, no, it was To the Stars, and, that Elizondo had sort of left in disgust that he wasn't with the government anymore. And now it's basically the same scenario I put out in Managing Magic is that they have these people. And as I said, when Elizondo left, I mean, they don't give you the videos when you walk out in disgust quitting your job. I'm not going to give you all the videos. So how are they getting the videos out? That was my absolute main question. And they really still haven't answered the question, except that now Semivan and others have sort of indicated that, yes, there is a government connection. The government is actually approving this stuff. And that's what Lavinda said during this news conference. You got to remember the California audience is a lot of I guess you call it the woo audience. It's more like me. It's like the consciousness thing. There's a lot of people who are into, not really into this whole, a lot of them believe the government is, the evil cabal and, the CIA is shafting us and our water's being poisoned and all this kind of stuff. So you get those kind of people where this isn't a big time story. And some of us have tried to say, no, I think everybody's just doing their job. These people are, because I've through Melinda Leslie, I've heard some of the stuff Jim Semivan has said, and Jim Semivan is the director of To the Stars. And so Melinda, if you've ever interviewed Melinda, and she's got sort of an idea that, that the government is, there's a lot of, stuff going on that shouldn't be going on. And so when she met with, she had this chance to talk to Jim Semivan a number of months ago. And so the first question I asked her when the interview was over, she phoned me up and she said, I talked to him. And I said, okay, Melinda, here's the question. Good guy or a bad guy? Because they have this indication that he's a bad guy. So I said, okay, Linda, you have always believed that there's, like, she's the top person on MILABs, government re-abducting poor abductees, drugging them and, torturing them or whatever they do, try to get information as to what the aliens told them. And so she deals with this sort of ugly side of the UFO thing. So I said, okay, good guy or bad guy? And she had this classic line. She says, well, I'll tell you, Grant. She said, I didn't drink the Kool-Aid, but I took a sip. And because when you meet these people, that's the thing, is you have these evil impression of these people. And then when you actually meet them, they're just average guys. They're just ordinary guys. Like Jim Semivan, as I try to point out to people so many times, is an experiencer. So you could say, okay, he's this evil guy. He's trying to run some operation on the public and stuff. And it's like, to me, it's like, no, he's doing a job doing that kind of stuff, but he wants to find out what's going on as well. And he's good friends with Chris Bledsoe, and he's interacting. Chris Bledsoe said of anybody in the whole UFO field, Jim Semivan is the guy he trusts the most. So when you get that kind of thing where you see these guys, when you see them in person, they're not that bad. And I think everybody's just doing their job, whoever the person is. And so I know they may have gotten some reaction. I didn't see that kind of reaction when I was there, although I wasn't in Lavinda's talk. And the people that would have been in this other event probably weren't the disclosure people. I know my disclosure lecture didn't get very many people at all, so maybe it's sort of not that big a topic anymore in California. And I'm even going to think of trying to move away from it. I got a couple more lectures on, but then I'm going to go to Xendras. I'm going to do maybe some more lectures on music, which is more, people really like that kind of stuff. When you do the weird thing when they sort of see their famous musician and they finally find out what the lyrics they've been singing all their life actually mean, and the fact that the guy's an experiencer. People love that kind of stuff. It's almost like like watching TV. It doesn't have the dark side that the disclosure story happens. The disclosure effort can be very, very dark in terms of political stuff and what are they doing, and people want to know what they're going to do next, and so I'm guessing an awful lot, and you're trying to get, I don't deal directly with anybody, but I'm listening to a bunch of people and trying to figure out what's going on, what are they doing, what kind of games are being played. And I absolutely do believe that this is a clear operation by the U.S. government to get the story out. There's no doubt in my mind.
There's such a lot of information, especially with the AATIP, the ATIP, Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. And when people started putting in FOIA requests to try and find out more, they were learning that there was no such thing as the ATIP program. In fact, it was a weaponization program that they were looking for. Are you buying this, or is this another cover-up, Grant?
Okay, well, let me tell you how that is working. The way I've done it, when I did the first book I did was UFOs, Area 51, and Government Informants in 1990. That's when I first started talking about this thing, about how the government gets this thing out. And in Managing Magic, I clearly say this is how you do it. So there's three options. You can either disclose, or you can cover up, or you can do something in between. So they are not disclosing, no matter what anybody says. I mean, in terms of full disclosure, what people think. Stand up, give us all the answers, tell us exactly what's going on. So they're not doing full disclosure, because if they were to do full disclosure, they'd stand the president up or the head of the Defense Department, and they'd show pictures of bodies and crafts and go through the whole thing and just spill it all out there. And that's not what they're doing. So people say disclosure, that's usually what people think. Because everybody has their definition of disclosure based upon what they want disclosed. Most people want everything. Just tell us the whole thing. Good stuff, bad stuff. So they're not disclosing, but they're also not covering up. A lot of people say they're covering up, and they're not covering up. Because if they were to cover up, they'd do it what the Canadian government is doing. Just shut your mouth, and the story would go away. Like, I don't know what the Canadian government's doing. I have no idea what the British government's doing, the Swiss government, the German government. Nothing. I have no concept, because they don't talk about it. It's not like the United States where, there's leaking and there's intelligence officers running around telling people what's going on and all that kind of stuff. It's like a circus in the United States with all this stuff. And so they're not covering up. They're doing something in between. So what they do, and this is my distinct impression of what they do, you take information and you surround it by disinformation and you throw it out there. Because what you want to do is you want to cover the story. You want plausible deniability. You don't want a situation where you spill the milk and you can't put it back in the glass. So what you want is to come out slowly. The way you get it to come out slowly is you put disinformation. And even Tom DeLonge has stated that this is what he understands. That you take the way he describes it is you put out a good story and then you follow it with a bad story to create confusion. So that's what they're doing. And so when you get this ATIP thing, and I sort of pointed out, although there's nobody really there to listen to the lecture, but I sort of pointed out, when you get this ATIP thing, you got to realize on December 16th, there was 3 major news agencies went with the story. This was planned. This was orchestrated by the U.S. government, and they basically handed the story. I think Leslie Kane described it. The story was basically laid out for us. That's what she said. So they go to the New York Times. They give them documents, which we haven't got. They give them they let them see documents. They give them photographs. They are videos, and they get confirmations. So when we go to say John Greenwald or anybody who's doing the FOIA, when they go to the public affairs office at the Pentagon, public affairs says no, we got no documents. We did not release any videos. So the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Politico would not have gone with that story unless they had two independent sources inside the Pentagon that they could trust that said, yes, this is for real. So what they do is they feed the story to the New York Times, Washington Post, and Politico. They provide two sources that say, off the record, this thing's for real. So they run with the story. Then when we try to go get it, then we can't get anything. And this is where all the disinformation comes from. So you take the information, you give it to the major media, and there's actually a court ruling that took place in the United States where the CIA actually won I think it was in federal court. They won a federal court ruling that they are allowed to leak classified information to reporters and then deny it in an FOIA. So they won this in a court battle. So that appears to be what they're doing. So they give the real material to the New York Times, Washington Post, say it's for real, and then when we try to go get it, then the Major Harris, who's the public affairs person at the Pentagon, says, we did not release any videos. Sorry, we did not release any videos. And then they say there's no records. So when people try to file, although John Greenwald is now saying that they're 2,300 or 2,100 cases behind, so there still may be material coming, but right now there's nothing coming out. So there's no documents, there's no videos, but the New York Times would not have run with the story unless they had the confirmation that the stuff's all for real. The other thing that's very interesting and shows you how this sort of confusion thing works, and I pointed this out just recently. If you take out the New York Times story, so you got to remember, all three news agencies, this is a story that took them 2 months to do. This is not a cut and paste 2-hour story. This is a story that they all had to research very carefully. They had to vet all this sort of stuff and like that. So they all go with the same story. And yet, when you look at the New York Times article, it's called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. If you go to the Washington Post, who is fed the same story, it's the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. If you go to Politico, it's Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. So, and then if you talk to the Stars, we had this whole discussion about John Greenwald was told by the Pentagon that it was advanced aviation that the Washington Post and Politico had used. So John Greenwald gets all suspicious. He said, this is something's wrong here. Somebody's lying. And he's trying to get an interview with Lou Elizondo to just simply describe to him, what's it called? Is it advanced aviation or is it advanced aerospace? I contact Eric Davis, Dr. Eric Davis, who was works for Hal Puthoff, who was a subcontractor on the ATIP contract, and he's very upset. He's like, when are you guys going to learn? And he's not happy with this sort of questioning the name. And he said it's called Advanced Aerospace, which was the New York Times one that Leslie Kane had helped write. So what you have is John Greenwald, you have the Pentagon, Washington Post, Politico, all saying one word. Then you have Lou Elizondo, to the Stars, and the Washington Post saying another. And they're all being fed by the same people. So the question is, what are they doing? And what I'm saying what they're doing is they want the confusion. They want us fighting. They want us all to say, what is it? Is it this? Is it that? We can't get any confirmation. Because John Greenwald said the most bizarre situation has occurred is that right now he can phone the Pentagon to this Major Harris in public affairs, and she'll answer the phone every single time, and she'll talk to him and answer all his questions and stuff. And he can't get an interview with Lou Elizondo. And he said it's completely bizarre that now the government is the one that's talking, and the people who are the researchers or the people who have the material in the field won't answer the phone. And he's tried for 3.5 or 4 months to get a hold of Lou Elizondo, and he can't get an interview. And he said it's apparent they're not going to talk to me. So it's this bizarre situation. But that's what they do, is they'll feed in two different names. And even last week, there was another article done about To the Stars, maybe a week ago, from the Washington Post. And then I saw that they had suddenly used the word aerospace. So I contacted the reporter, and thank goodness he replied, because most of these reporters won't reply. I said, okay, in the original Washington Post story, you used the word aviation. Now you're using the word aerospace. So what's going on? You're the same newspaper. And he said, well, good question. I really don't know. I know that when I talked to the Pentagon, they said aerospace. So the Pentagon tells Greenwald aviation, and they tell the Washington Post aerospace. And that's what they want. They want this sort of confusion where everybody's bumping into each other, because it slows the story down. It plausible deniability. Like the original story of the Holloman Air Force Base film. Holloman Air Force Base film was leaked to Bob Emmenegger in 1974. They were supposed to put it in their video. Then at the last minute, they pulled the video. And Bob always had the date he was given for the film where they filmed this UFO and the aliens coming out at Holloman Air Force Base as May of 1971. So, of course, I put it out. And then Richard Doty comes out and he says, oh, no, it was 1964. And so then Linda starts telling his version, 1964, and then people come to me and say, oh, you got it wrong, it's 1964. I said, no, it's May of 1971. That's what Bob Emmenegger was told, and that's what they want. They want they put out two different stories so that you and I will fight about what's the date, what color were the eyes, all this kind of stuff, and we sit there, and I call you a liar, you call me a liar, and we sit there and fight, and meanwhile they're laughing in the background because the whole idea about the Holloman Air Force Base story or this ATIP program, because there's even a thing that came out later. It was there was a leak. A Pentagon official phones this Paul, this guy in Australia. His name escapes me, but phones this guy in Australia and says, "Oh, you should check this name." And then it's the AAWSP program, and that ATIP was only a part of the program. So then you got a third name. So this thing starts flying around, and Eric Davis is all upset, and people are all fighting. I mean, we've been scammed, and what's going on here? And that's what they want. They want the confusion, but what's happened is they have confirmed, and most people in the street who have seen this story think that the U.S. government is now confirming the fact that they're doing UFOs. It's all for real. So it's the general idea they want to get across. Yes, we've got a program. It's now been made public, almost like Area 51. Area 51 came out. Bob Lazar went down after everybody figured out he didn't have the 2 degrees that he claimed he had. And everybody said, it's a hoax. Bob Lazar, look, he lied about his education. It's a hoax. And so everybody sort of drops the story. But the idea that Area 51 has flying saucers being back engineered there still went on. So that's what they do. They drop the story. Nobody can confirm the story, but the story still gets out.
Have you ever been able to find a resolution to the question, Grant, of why the To the Stars Academy is dodging the alternative media outside of the Coast to Coast crew?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I said they've fired the UFO community and they're the alternate community. And the reason that is it's a managed story. It's a very carefully managed story. I even heard tonight that they're going to allow Lou Elizondo and Fravor, the pilot, to be their spokesman, to run around and do the interviews and stuff like that. And the reason they don't deal with you or even me is that you're going to ask the serious questions. There was the story told with Lou Elizondo was supposed to go to UFO Congress, which is the big event, 1,500 people in Phoenix every year. They announced that he was coming, and they were selling all these tickets and stuff, and then suddenly he wasn't coming. He was just going to appear on film. So the guy who runs UFO Congress, Alejandro Rojas, offered, okay, we'll fly to Lou Elizondo, we'll do an interview or whatever. And then To the Stars came back and said, well, no, you send us the questions and we'll interview him. So what you're doing is you're, again, managing magic. You're managing the story. You want to control the questions. You want the questions that you control. Same as he was in Brazil. There was a big publicity. He was just in Brazil a week ago or 2 weeks ago or whatever. And it's the same thing. He appears on camera. And it's this controlling the story because you're going to ask him a bunch of hard questions. And this was even told to us by Jim Semivan, had said that Lou Elizondo was told not to go to UFO Congress. Not by him. And he said John Alexander had told him. So he had said, don't go. And on their part, you can see why they're doing this. He said, you're going to go there. They're going to ask you a bunch of hardball questions. And then when you answer the questions, they're not going to believe you anyway. So why would you go? Because what you got to remember is Lou Elizondo, and I've pointed this out, and it always escapes people. Lou Elizondo had the same job as Richard Doty. Everybody said he's an intelligence officer. He is not. He's a counterintelligence officer in the Department of Defense. So is Richard Doty. I say it doesn't mean that they're bad guys. I say they're doing their job. Whatever their job is, they're doing their job. So you have a situation where they fired the UFO community because they don't need to deal with us. We know what's going on, and there's a bunch of idiots like me and other people that will question this, they'll question that. Everybody's fighting, and it's like, why would you go into this field? We don't need to convince the UFO community. They already know. Most of them aren't going to listen to us. They're going to distrust us, and it's just going to be a battle the whole time. So what they have done, this is why they went to the Washington Post, New York Times, and Politico, is you're firing the alternative media, and you're firing the UFO community, and you're going directly to the people. What this is the same as a presidential election campaign. You have the Republicans and the Democrats. If you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat. I'm not going after your people because they're not voting for me. You're not going after my people because they're not voting for you. No point in wasting advertising on that stuff. What you do is you go for the swing voters. So you have maybe 50% of people in the United States really don't know for sure. They really, I don't know whether UFOs exist or not. That's what you're doing. You're trying to swing the swing voters. You don't care about the people who are hardline stuff. You're not looking for the little audiences. You're looking for the big audience. You're trying to hit the American public, because the American public, when you get enough pressure and enough people on the side, they're going to start going to their Congress and the senators, and they're going to force a congressional hearing. And so what the government is trying to do, they're moving it away from the government. That's why they moved it to private industry. That's why they moved it to Bob Bigelow. Bob Bigelow is going to do the disclosure. That's why you do this whole thing where you swing the people, and then the people force the Congress and the Senate to go with a hearing, and the White House is off the hook. The CIA is off the hook. They don't have to do the disclosure, because it's always the thing, if the CIA, the president makes a disclosure, you're the bad guy. Suddenly everybody's going to blame you, so you're moving it to somebody else. That's why I believe Stephen Greer was told by Bill Clinton through an intermediary in the 1990s, I can't do it, but you can. They're trying to get themselves off the hook.
Right. Grant, great timing to shut that one down, because we are going to go to our final break of the night. Grant Cameron here on Spaced Out Radio. He will be appearing for the Alien Cosmic Expo in Toronto the weekend of the 23rd, and Grant will be talking disclosure, UFOs, so much more there. I know he's getting tired of the topic, but he's one of the best for a reason. We'll have more with Grant coming up in hour number 3, along with the Thought of the Day right after this.
Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
The first annual Caribou Paracon is happening September 28th to 30th in the 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Brought to you by the Canadian Society of Questers and Spaced Out Radio. Come listen to our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Elizabeth Anglin, Paisley Town, Mike Moran, Eric Cooper, and more. It's a 3-day supernatural adventure at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Tickets for the weekend are $150 Canadian. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
We're lighting the void on Saturday nights on Spaced Out Radio. Hey, this is Joe Roop, and I'm hanging out in SOR headquarters every Saturday night, bringing you the latest news when it comes to the weird and strange. Bigfoot, occult, UFOs, ghosts, and everything in between, I got you covered. You can tune in to spacedoutradio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. Come travel into the void with us on Spaced Out Saturdays.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
The Call of the Wild is in Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is one of the hottest bars and restaurants in the city. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose will rock you like a hurricane all night long. Great food with everything on the menu at $6.95 near the corner of Nelson and Granville. Get your horns up and come rock with us. The Moose Vancouver, the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories.
From the mile-high state of Colorado, sharing our signal around the world, I invite you to Spaced Out Sundays. Hi, I'm Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm closing out the week by taking you on a paranormal journey to the world of the weird. Ghosts, aliens, psychic phenomena, I will hit it all and your questions too. So let us highlight the paranormal for you. So come join me for Spaced Out Sundays starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, only at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Space Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, we talk UFOs in Canada. What is Canada's role in disclosure? Victor Vigiani from Zealand Communications is going to join us starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We welcome in everyone listening in on the SOR radio network, including the Fringe.fm. You can watch us live every Monday through Friday night on Periscope.tv and our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. That's where we store our archives. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club, Ecthylocoprolite. Ecthylocoprolite is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night, right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, we got a plethora of features for you. Rock out to some Bumblefoot, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, read up on the encounter online, or watch great videos from UFO Seekers, Contact TV, and so much more. Grant Cameron is with us. He's going the distance tonight. Grant will be speaking at the Alien Cosmic Expo on the weekend of the 23rd, as if you're in the Toronto area or in Eastern United States, it's a quick drive north for a great weekend getaway talking all things UFO. Grant's website is presidentialufo.com. Grant, welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me back. Yeah. The website was just actually rebuilt. It should be up tonight or tomorrow or whatever. So somebody did it. It was actually, I hadn't posted anything on it for, probably a year, just after Trump came in, I think, the first article, and because I had some sort of professional guy build it for me, and it looked pretty sharp, but he had some personal problems and couldn't do it anymore, and suddenly I was stuck with a website and I didn't know what the heck to do with it. And so it's just back up again, and then I've got the YouTube, the White House UFO YouTube channel, which is most of my stuff has been posted on right now, because the website I haven't done anything for about a year, but we've got a few articles where different bizarre things. Today I got, we're going to put up an article about the, as I told you, I was interviewing this woman that was involved in Spain with the Atacama mummy, because that's where the being is. And she had a full report that was written by the guy who owns it. And I was kind of fascinated with some of the stuff she was talking about, and it does make sense. I mean, you got this whole thing about the 14-month-old fetus. It's pretty shaky. It's almost like the crash test dummies dropping dummies out of a plane in 1953 that people misidentified as 1947, because she was going through all the stuff with the the kid's skull. And I actually was doing some research on this during the day, preparing for this report that we're gonna put up, just to sort of give the other side of the story, that this may not be as clean a story with Gary Nolan from Stanford coming out and saying that that there was nothing to this. It was a 14-month-old fetus, and yet if you look at got pictures of 14-month-old fetuses, like skulls, they have, as most doctors who have any sense know, the plates aren't together. There's actually a big gap in the plates, because when the baby's head comes out of the birth canal, it actually, these plates fold over, so it can get out of the birth canal. Otherwise, it's going to get out of the birth canal. And so they have these sort of like gaps in the baby's skull. So I was looking at these, and of course the Atacama doesn't have that, and then I'm asking about the teeth. So it was kind of neat to have somebody who actually had the being in her hands, and I'm asking her all these questions, and to get that report, and a couple of other reports that I've never sort of put out for the last year and a half because I didn't have the website. I do the one, I don't know if I ever told you the story about the rapid image cycling, which is kind of a really, it's got to do with the consciousness thing as well. And this is this whole idea. I first, when I did the Inspired book, my conclusion was that whether you're a savant, a musician, a Nobel Prize winner who got a download like Albert Einstein, he has the vision of the toboggan in the middle of the night. He has the dream of the toboggan going the speed of light, and he makes this famous statement, I knew I had to understand that dream. In fact, you could say, and I would say, that my entire career was based upon a meditation on a dream. And this whole idea that my download or these dreams come with absolute certainty, and people work on them, they know they have to do it. So I've always been interested in the consciousness thing, which is always to me is right brain, that if you can shut down your little ego left brain, you can disassociate and tap into this field. So anyway, I had run across, in fact, starting tonight is the big remote viewing SSE conference in Las Vegas. I was just talking to Melinda Leslie as she was arriving at the hotel. And so the SSE is sort of the leading edge of thought on the weirdness. So they're doing remote viewing, they're doing UFO, no, not so much UFO, but they're doing remote viewing, all this kind of stuff. And so the remote viewing conference is joining up with SSE. The guy who runs SSE is a guy by the name of Dr. William Bankston. And he has what is sometimes known as the Cadillac of all healing methods, energy healing methods. And when I heard how this thing worked, I immediately said, man, this is shutting down the left brain. And what the story was that they teach you to flip a couple thousand images a second in your head. And of course, it doesn't make any sense until they teach you how to do it. But I actually went to Chicago to be trained on this thing, because as soon as I saw it, I went, I know what they're doing. This is shutting down left brain. And what they are is ego images. So you take these, and actually two of my images were going to Revelstoke and going to Barkerville. So you get these images. Oh, I'd like to do this. I'd like to do that. I have a car, blue car, and it has this kind of interior, and I want a house, and it looks like this. And you have all these ego images. You're not allowed to take any positive images, like I'm going to save the world, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Those images you can't use. You can only use like ego images. And although they don't describe them ego images, he calls them self as images. But to me, it's ego images. So what you do is you take these images and you take 20 of them, and then you memorize them, and then you use a drum or something, and you start to flip these images. So you can flip these 20 images and faster and faster and faster, and then you put them on a wheel, and then you spin the whole wheel all at one time. And you can actually learn how to do this thing where you are flipping a couple thousand images in your head, and suddenly you feel this heat coming out of your left hand. And again, the left hand is run by the right brain. So the heat is coming out the left hand. So anyway, I go and do all this training stuff, and I actually feel the heat coming out of my hand. I cannot believe it. When I do my first training session, the only time I ever felt the heat come out of my hand. But I had gone through this whole process for months trying to practice this thing, flipping it in your head. So anyway, to me, it was simple. Like, what you're doing is you're taking these ego images and you're going to the left brain, because the left brain is into physical things and ego stuff. And you just basically send it for coffee. Say, look at these images. Aren't they pretty cool? And the left brain basically is sitting there transfixed with these stupid images, and it sort of shuts down. And then, boop, the right brain allows it to channel the energy through. So Bankston called it getting the healing out of the way. And the important thing is this, and I realized this right from the word go. This is not something that Dave Scott or Grant Cameron figured out. I mean, you do not figure this out. You do not say, oh, you're not got nothing better to do today. I think I'll flip a couple thousand images a second in my head and I'll cure cancer. And what they were claiming was the more aggressive the cancer, the faster they could cure it, except if you had chemotherapy or radiation. Otherwise, didn't matter what it was. And the things that worked the best were people with Alzheimer's and animals, because neither has an ego. And that made sense to me too when they told me that was the highest rate they had for success was these two. So anyway, when I saw it, I said, they're shutting down the left brain. There's no doubt they're shutting down the left brain. And so I did the training, and then I'm thinking this had to come from somewhere. You do not figure this out. And so I'm looking. Finally, I find it. William Bankston, who runs the SSE that's having this big conference starting tonight in Las Vegas with the remote viewing people, he wrote a book on it. And in the book, he said it was taught to him by a guy by the name of Bennett Merrick. Bennett Merrick was a psychic guy who he met. He was working, when he was doing his PhD, he was working as a lifeguard at a pool. And Merrick was there And he got to know this guy, and this guy could make clouds disappear. He was very psychic, and Bankston was trying to figure out how this worked. And he could also do a thing where they'd go into a hospital, and Merrick could they'd go into a hospital, and if you were all coming into the hospital, say Williams Lake, and everybody just signs a card as they come in the hospital, the patients. They put it in an envelope, and the person at the front desk collects all these envelopes. And then Merrick could come in, and he could take envelope number 1. Okay, that guy's got heart disease. Number 2, that guy's got liver. And he was 100% accurate. So Bankston's trying to figure out, how does this guy do this? And then at one point, he finds out that Merrick can actually heal. He heals Bankston of a back injury that he got on a swimming team many years before, and he's never had any pain since. So he asks Bennett Merrick, well, how are you doing this? How can you be so good at healing people? And he said, well, he flips his images in his head. And then in the book, Merrick at the end, or Bankston at the very end of the book says, Bennett Merrick, he had some problems, In the end, he was actually trying to convince me that he was an alien. And this is the key. So here's the alien connection. They're doing this cycling thing, and it may be a download from an alien. So I'm working on this thing, and suddenly I come across, I'm listening to Susie Hansen. I don't know if you've ever had her on your show, from New Zealand. And Susie has a dramatic story. And she's done an audio, or maybe it was one of the interviews I did with her. She's talking, and then she says, it was February of 2010, and the aliens took us to what appeared to be like an underground theater environment. And there was 200 to 250 of us in a room. And the being was standing on the stage. And then he walks off the stage, and there's a flash. An image comes on the screen. And it's an environmental image. And then a flash. Another one. Flash, 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 flash. And she said, they're going faster and faster. And she said, suddenly there's hundreds of images, there's 100 or more images a second on the screen. And she said the emotion was dramatic. People were crying, and they had taught us how to do it. 100 of images at a time on the screen. And I'm thinking, man, I just, the shivers went up my spine. This is Merrick's method. He claimed to be an alien. This is exactly the same method. And then the other one that occurred was...
Grant, can I stop you right there for a second with that story?
Yeah.
Did she describe the theater? What it looked like?
Not to me, but she would know the theater. Oh, yeah, she would know the theater.
Because I'll tell you why. The last time I was abducted... Yeah, my wife and I were in a theater.
Yeah, you should interview. If you never interviewed Susie Hansen?
No.
Oh, she's got one of the most amazing stories. She told that story. She's also got the stuff with the technology. And the other guy you should interview if you've not interviewed is a guy by the name of Steve Boucher out of St. Catharines, Ontario. He was the guy whose entire band was abducted in 1972. This is first written up in the 1980s. He was one of Bud Hopkins' clients. And both him and Susie Hansen described technology that was on the ship. And they both told me the story independently. I actually recorded video of them both talking about this. And then last year at the Cosmic Expo in Toronto, Steve Boucher is talking about it, and Susie Hansen had been flown into the event, and she said she was just she couldn't believe it when he described this technology. And what the technology is, it's a thing that the aliens use, and they put it on their arm, and you can see the veins. And then they can change the sort of the setting, and you can see the muscles, and you change the settings, and you can see the bones, and you can just run it up and down the arms and the legs and stuff, and you can see all your veins, all your muscles, and all this sort of stuff. And he described this 1972 as his abduction case, where the whole band was taken together. So her story is you got to interview her. She was the person at UFO Congress this year, got standing ovation. And the UFO Congress, if you know them, they're not much into abductees. They're more into scientific nuts and bolts and all that kind of stuff, sightings in the sky and stuff. But she got a standing ovation. She's a dramatic story. And she's actually writing her second book. She has very high recall of what happened to her. So she was telling the story about this flashing thing. And then the other big story was, this happened at I saw this as well at Cosmic Life Expo, or Alien Cosmic Expo. one of the girls from the 62 school kids in Rwanda, 1994, is in Toronto. She lives in Hamilton. Her parents were Salvation Army ministers or missionaries, and that's why they were in Rwanda Rhodesia in 1994 when this school incident. You're familiar with the school incident, right? With the
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Okay, so she's one of the kids in the schoolyard, and she starts telling this story. So her story is that she's going. There's no fence around this place, but there are these logs that sort of are a boundary for the schoolyard. So she's on these logs with her friend, and they're beside each other. There's two logs, and they're running along these logs. So they're sort of bouncing up and down as they go along. And the way she describes the story, she sees a flash out of the corner of her eye, and then she looks over, and there's this. It's like a gray, but not like the other, like an ordinary gray, but like a gray, who's right beside them, and he's levitated, and he's moving alongside them, but he's sort of imitating them, like he's bouncing up and down like they are. And then she's looking at this bizarre situation with this alien sort of bouncing up and down beside her, and all of a sudden she goes like this, boom, and suddenly he's right in front of them, and they're frozen. And she said then it was coming out of the eyes, and all the kids, if you've seen the John Mack video where he interviews these kids, they talk about the information is coming out of the eyes. So the stuff is coming out of the eyes, and it's the same thing. She said there's images, catch flash, 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 and she's getting technological images coming at, I don't know what the rate. I tried to get a hold of her, but they're sort of protecting her. They got some guy who says, oh, she's stressed out or whatever. And I said, well, you got to realize, these people can commit suicide. I mean, the only way you're going to get rid of the stress is to let her talk and start talking about this stuff. But I could never get to her. And all I wanted to ask was one question. How fast were the images going? Because Susie Hansen had talked about it, Bankston had talked about it with this Bennett Merrick, and it was evident that the aliens were using this rapid image cycling to impress very strong ideas and stuff in the head. Because what Susie Hansen said is all these people are crying, and then the being comes out on the stage, and he just waves his hand across the crowd, and instantly everybody stops crying. And everybody sort of calms down, but the images are still there. The impression and the emotions of those images are still there. And theirs were environmental images in this theater. So this, and her name is Emily Trim, was one of the girls on the log. And she described, she's getting these technological images coming at a very high rate of speed into her head. And the last one is this flash. And she said, that doesn't mean the world's going to be destroyed. But the message was, you've got technology, but you could do better with how you're dealing with your technology. And the girl beside her on the other log is also frozen, and she's getting the environmental images at a very high rate of speed. And so when you see that kind of stuff, that's not something people are going to make up. That's not, something that, as I said, like you don't sit down and think, well, I'm going to, rapid image stuff, try to see how many images I can go through my head at a time. That's something that you had to be given from someplace else. That's not something you're going to suddenly decide to do. So that is an interesting thing that I'm putting up. The other thing I'm putting up, which is related, is another very bizarre thing that happens in ufology that I first discovered in 2013. That was when I got the consciousness download. And then I got another one about a year ago, much more complex download. But the 2012 one, it basically said non-local consciousness is basically how this thing works. It's the answer to the question I asked in 1975, because I had the sightings, nobody would publish the book, and all I was interested in is somebody's got to know what the hell is going on here. Somebody's got to know what this is all about. And that's why I went after the highest level officials I could to find out what do they know, trying to find out the answer for what I had seen in 1975. And so I did the consciousness lecture, my first one in Phoenix in 2013. And the woman that runs the MUFON group, a big MUFON group in Phoenix, comes to me and she says, are you still going to talk to Pam Dupuy? And I said, yeah, I guess so. And I'm thinking, well, I must have agreed to talk to this woman or something. I don't remember agreeing, but I said, whatever. So she said, Pam's coming to my house on Monday. So Stacy, the woman, goes to work, and then I'm sitting there waiting, and this Pam comes up. She's like fairly old. She's in, her 70s, and with her better half, and they come up, and she says, what did Stacy tell you about me? And I said, I don't know. I'm just supposed to talk to you. She said, that's good. She comes walking in the room. And so she starts on the thing about, she remote view. She was abducted. She remembers standing in the middle of a field with a diaper on and the ships flying around and all this. You hear all this stuff. I mean, same old story. So she's telling this story, and then she hits me with this thing. And this is like, remember, this is 37 years into my career of doing this UFO stuff. She says, "Oh, and last night I was flying the craft." And I went, "You are what?" She said, "I was flying the craft." I said, "They let you fly the craft?" And she said, "Yeah, I've flown 3 different models." And so then I said to her, "They let you fly the craft?" "Yeah." I said, "Well, how do you fly a craft?" And she said, "You do it with your mind." And that was, then I suddenly realized why they'd set me up to talk to this lady. This is the whole consciousness thing. That she basically said that in the early years, in the 1950s, when she first started to do this as a teenager, they would take her and they had bands. And if you remember, I think it was, maybe it was even Phil Corso, day after Roswell, talks about this thing with the bands, that you put these bands and you fly the craft and it taps into your mind. And then she said, then the bands got smaller and smaller, and then suddenly there was no bands, that you could actually fly the craft just with your mind without touching anything. And it was all done by telepathy, and that the craft was alive and that you become one with the craft. So I started gathering these, and I've got them on my White House UFO YouTube channel. I've got maybe about 8 or 9. I've got 48 different witnesses I've talked to or gotten actual written stories of these people. And nobody, 48 out of 48 will say the same thing. When someone says, "Oh, I was flying the craft," you say, "Well, how do you fly a craft?" Everybody says the same thing. You fly it with your mind. And just in the last month or two, I was in LA. I was giving 2 speeches in LA. And it's like they're reading off a script card, a cue card. It's absolutely the same story all the time. I gave the lecture, and this was Orange County, I believe it was. So after the Orange County thing, people go for the restaurant. So we go to the restaurant. I really didn't want to go, but I went anyway. And so we're sitting there, and then all of a sudden this guy comes in. His name is Robert. And they say, "Robert, you missed the lecture. You should have been there. It's fantastic. Man, he was talking about flying the craft. Tell him about your dream." So he comes up, and I said, "Oh, you had a dream of flying the craft?" And he said, "Well, it was just a dream." And I said, "Well, everybody says it's a dream. Or not everybody. Half the people say they think it's a dream." So I said, "Sit down, tell me your story. Let's see if it matches everybody else." So he sits down, and then someone says, "Robert, tell him you're a pilot." And I said, "Oh, you're a pilot," because my father was a pilot for the Canadian government, and my son's a pilot. So I said, "Oh, you're a pilot. What kind of planes did you fly?" And he said, "Oh, I flew F-4s, I flew this, I flew that. I flew F-16s. I went, "You flew F-16s? And he says, "Yeah, I'm a retired U.S. Air Force colonel." And I go, "Okay, tell me your story." So he goes, it's the same story. He's going, his was a triangle craft. There's beings, and they always just say the same thing. Or there's figures with me. People will never say it's an alien. They'll never say it's military officials. They'll always sort of use the word figures. There's figures, and they're behind them to the side. They can't really see them, but they know that there's figures with them that are accompanying them onto the craft. He goes onto the craft, and then he's standing there, and there's just a craft, and all there is like a tabletop along the wall, a long tabletop. And he said you could tell this thing was alive. It was like a plasma thing. It was like it pulsing. It was like direct impression that this thing was alive, this whole operation. So then he's and they say, "Go ahead." And then lots of people say the same thing, that they say to the figures, that they say in their mind, "I don't know what to do." And this F-16 guy they just said, "You know what to do, just do it." And then he goes up and he puts his hands on this panel. And again, he said, "This is like alive." And he said it was like, I don't know what he means by pressure pads on an F-16. He said it was like the pressure pads on an F-16. He said suddenly this thing sucked his hands down onto the panel, and suddenly, boom, he's flying the craft. And he's going, "Oh my goodness, he's flying the craft." And whatever you think is what the craft does. So it's the whole, might even be the thing with the entangled particle thing. And that's why Chris Bledsoe, who flew the craft, told me the same thing. You look at say a mountainside or a cloud, and you think to go there, and boom, the thing is right there. Suddenly it's right in front of you. It's not like you fly there. It's almost like it comes to you instantaneously. It's like whatever you think, that's what it does. So you can move. I even had one woman, I just put it on, where she got fearful that the thing was going to crash, and the thing crashed. Whatever you think is what the craft does. And everybody says the same thing. The craft is alive. You become one with the craft, and it's you and the craft, and it's you. The craft becomes you. You become the craft. And they're flying it. I remember this F-16 guy was saying, "I'm flying the thing," he says, and then so I take my one hand off, and I want to see if the thing will stall, and nothing happens. And then he takes his other hand off, but he keeps it about 6 inches from this tabletop because he wants to slam his hand back down if this thing stalls. And he's got his hand off, and he's still flying the craft. And everybody will say the same thing. You put your hand either on a flat panel, and then I had a guy, a 747 United Airlines pilot. He had actually been through a Xendra. He was one of the guys that went through that 50 Xendra thing. And so I phoned him to find out the Xendra story. That was at Mount Shasta. I think he lives in San Francisco right now. He's retired, moving back to Florida, but he was a 747 airline pilot, a captain. And he tells the same story. Like there's a figure with him. They tell him to fly it, and he describes like a ball type thing. That there's a ball, he can't see the ball, but he's got his hand on a ball. Got an experiencer out of Boulder, Colorado, who actually opened for Pat Boone. She was a singer. She describes this ball, these two balls. And so I go through all these things, and you put your hand on a ball, a pad, or Chris Bledsoe talked like a beehive type thing, like standing in the middle of the room, you put your hand on this thing, and you become one with the craft. Whatever you think is what the craft does. And so I don't know if you interviewed John Alexander, but you have this situation where John Alexander goes to see Chris Bledsoe, and they're standing at the Cape Fear River. Have you ever interviewed Chris Bledsoe?
Him, I have not.
Okay, I think his Hollywood deal is done. I'm going to try to interview him. I've got to find out. He couldn't talk because he was trying to swing this Hollywood deal. When I was in Contact in the Desert, he was trying to get a hold of me, and he had his scriptwriters and a whole crew of about 8 people. He called them his team. So I guess the deal is on, that they're actually starting to do this thing. And the last I heard, it was going to be a 5-year series. Very, very bizarre story. I mean, I was involved with one incident, and then the one with the book where he gives me the message from the alien, the messages and the music. But so John Alexander goes to see Chris Bledsoe, and in one interview he's asked, "Why did you go see Chris Bledsoe?" And he sort of hesitates and says, my sponsor asked me to go see him. So I think the sponsor is the CIA, Jim Semivan, because Jim Semivan is friends with Chris Bledsoe. So John Alexander goes to see Chris Bledsoe, and his whole thing takes place 2007. He's cured of Crohn's disease. There's 14 UFOs. There's about 4 different types of aliens, or 4 different incidents with aliens that night. There's 5 witnesses. His son is caught in the bush with these 2 aliens that have got him. As long as they look at him, he can't move. He's on board the ship. He's regressed by John Mack's associate. It's just the wildest story. So anyway, he's telling John Alexander where this is happening. They're at the Cape Fear River where this all happened the first night, and every night, just opened it up, and everything happens almost every day to this guy. Something's happening. But so he's there with John Alexander, and then he's standing they're leaning against the car, and all of a sudden he goes, "John, they're here." And John goes, "What do you mean they're here?" "They're here. They're here. I can sense them. They're here." And John says, "Well, how do you know they're here?" "I don't know. They're just here. I know they're here." All of a sudden, boom, this UFO right over top of their heads. This UFO appears, and it goes flying off into the distance. And John wrote a second book. He just published another book about his bizarre travels around the world to see shamans and all these weird things he's done all his life. And he basically has a whole chapter on Chris Bledsoe. He was just blown away by this thing. So I asked Chris about this, and he said, well, what it is that once you've been one with the craft, once you've flown the craft, you put your hand on the craft or whatever, you can actually, when it's there, because you vibrate sort of at the same level. So when the craft is in the area, that's what he says. He can sense when the craft's around. And you'll hear people describe this sort of thing where they seem to know to go outside, or they throw a message in their head, go outside. And there's this interaction where, these experiencers are able to sort of know and interact with the craft. And so that's something I'm starting to put these up on my YouTube channel, which just fascinates me. It's the whole consciousness thing. It shows you how important the consciousness thing is. And then I show the video of the rat brain thing with the F-22. And this is 2004 White World Technology, University of Southern Florida, where they take 20,000 neurons from a rat brain, they put it in a little tiny petri dish, and they wire all these electrodes into the bottom of the dish. And then they give the dish about 3 days as these neurons start to interact with each other. And it creates this little brain, and the neurons are all talking to each other, and they're sort of sending signals to see how it works. And then they start sending signals from an F-22 Raptor, a fighter jet, into this thing. And they send a low signal, and this thing will send a high signal back, or a high frequency signal. And they teach this thing to fly this aircraft, up and down, side to side, all this kind of stuff. And so you got 20,000 neurons. We've got 100 billion neurons in our brain. They got 20,000 neurons, and it's flying an F-22. And I remember at one point I was giving a lecture about this, and George Fylor from Fylor's Files was there, and he was a major in the U.S. Air Force. And I asked George, I said, George, is it easy to fly an F-22 simulator? And he said, no, it's not easy. So you have these 20,000 neurons flying an F-22 simulator. And then what they do in this documentary, if you Google search F-22 and rat brain, you'll see this 5-minute video of them doing this thing. So then they change the weather, and they put like thunderstorms and real strong winds and stuff like that, and the thing just continues to fly the craft. It's able to adapt and fly the craft. So this comes this whole symbiotic relationship thing. And supposedly in the F-22, the F-35 or whatever, they have this thing where it's reading your brain waves, and you can actually like fly the craft, and it's a symbiotic thing where you can fly the craft just by thinking. So you don't have to move anything. You just say, get out of the way, and the craft will move out of the way, or go faster, go slower, fire the weapons, all this kind of stuff. And that seems to be where it's going, why the U.S. military would be so interested in that kind of stuff. But the mind thing with both this flying the craft and with this rapid image cycling shows how critically important the consciousness element is into whatever the intelligence behind the phenomena is doing. They're very much into this kind of stuff.
Grant, a lot of what you say, what these consciousness people are talking about when it comes to flying craft, we were talking about this on this show probably about 4 or 5 months ago. And I hate to say this because I don't know if it's coincidental or something more to it, but it awfully reminds me of the mid-'80s movie by Disney called Flight of the Navigator.
Well, that one or the other one, the one that the 747 airline pilot talked about was Firefox with Clint Eastwood. Have you ever seen that thing where he goes and he steals
must speak Russian, must think Russian.
Yeah, and he's thinking. And the guy, the 747 airline pilot told me, and you'll hear it in his video, he said, it's the same thing, but you don't really have to think. You just go through it. Whereas he had to think all the time to give commands and stuff. But he thought, and I think it's probably true, that may not have been fiction. That may have been dropping something, and that's how this thing works. You want plausible deniability, so you're putting it in through fiction. The same as the story of Area 51, that if you've heard the story about George Knapp, when the Bob Lazar thing got very controversial and people started, saying he was lying and all this kind of stuff, George determined that he wanted to find out because he had all these 24 witnesses that had come to him and told him little bits and pieces of the Lazar story. And what he wanted to do was, he said, I've got to find somebody who really knows what's going on. And there was this one guy that he determined he was the top. He had been retired, but he was the third top guy at EG&G. In the 1940s, he had wired the atomic bombs and stuff at the site. His son was a state senator and very powerful guy. So George said, well, if this thing's for true, this guy's going to know what's going on. So he goes to this guy and he talks to the guy, meets him at an event. And he said, I'm George Knapp, and how you doing? And I enjoyed your lecture, whatever. And George starts following this guy around. And eventually he gets to know this guy well enough that the guy invites him to his house. And he's going to show him these bomb craters where they were detonating atomic bombs in the 1940s. And I guess this guy's not an idiot. George was into UFOs. So he comes to the house, and he's got this big album, and he's showing these bomb craters from atomic bombs and stuff. And George is looking, and then he sort of he shuts the scrapbook, and he says, you didn't come here to look at bomb craters, did you? And George said, no, not really. And then he says, I know what you want to talk about. You want to talk about UFOs. And George said, yeah, I'd rather talk about UFOs. And then this guy's wife says, oh, don't start telling those stories. And he starts telling George these stories. It's real. It's the Area 51's all real. And you got to remember, George tracked this guy down. This is not some guy who volunteered to do this. And so George, there's a restaurant off the strip in Vegas. And I was there with George where he sort of holds court. He has a sort of a table there. And he comes in. Everybody in the restaurant knows who he is. And he takes people there, and I guess he interviews them or talks to them or whatever. So he's meeting this guy at this restaurant for breakfast for about 6 months. And George tells a story that when he goes there, he's not allowed to tape. He's not allowed to take notes. And George would say when he'd come out of the restaurant after talking to this guy, he would madly write as fast as he could to remember everything that this guy had told him. So this goes on for 6 months. And then what happens is the Senate Appropriations Committee is doing an investigation. And I guess George mentioned who this guy was, and suddenly the Senate Appropriations Committee investigator is going to this guy, and suddenly he goes to George and he says, I can't talk anymore. They're seeing us. I can't talk. And he sort of cuts it off. But during that period, so George is saying to him, what do you mean? It's for real? And the guy said, yeah, it's for real. We did all this kind of stuff. And then George said, well, weren't you afraid the story was going to get out? And the guy says, no, we weren't afraid the story was going to get out. We were afraid it was going to get out. And George says, what? You actually had a live alien? And the guy goes, well, we didn't know how to communicate with it. George said, you had a live alien? It came all the way across the universe and you kept it captive? And the guy goes, but we couldn't communicate with it. And the whole thing was this fear of this live alien getting loose. And then you take a look at the movie Paul. The movie Paul is that exact story.
I just saw that.
The live alien gets out of – and this – so you see how they do this thing. This may be actually based on actual reality. Or I'll give you the biggest one that happened to me. I told about the Holloman Air Force Base film. So in the 1970s, they went to Bob Emmenegger and Alan Sandler, who had connections in the CIA. They wanted to do this UFO documentary. Bob didn't believe in UFOs. He was just shocked when they wanted to do this documentary. They're allowed to go into the Pentagon without signing in. They can talk to anybody they want. They have unlimited control of what's going on. There's a CIA agent on the set the entire time that they're doing this whole thing. So they have this Holloman Air Force Base film that they pull at the last minute, and they say it's Watergate. We can't release it. It's not the right time, whatever. So they pull the film. And so they put the documentary, it's called UFOs, Past, Present, Future. And if you want to see it on the internet, it's called UFOs That Has Begun, 1979. So anyway, they do the thing, but they allow 8 seconds of the film. There's 8 seconds of the actual Holloman film, and Bob confirmed that to me. And I said, what do you mean there's 8 seconds? Like, you told me they took the film back. And he said, well, they did take the film. And I said, but Bob, there's 8 seconds in the film. And he said, well, it's just background. And I go, what do you mean it's just background? And he said, well, it didn't show anything. And that's what they've done with the claim is with these videos released by To the Stars, that the part they've released is the unclassified part, and that the rest of it they can't release because it's got classification. That's with the Holloman Air Force Base. Once you just see it coming over the hill. It's like a very bright thing. In 6 o'clock in the morning, it's light out. You can see this bright light coming over the hill, coming towards the base. But when it gets close, when you can actually see the saucer or see the aliens get out, then that's classified material. So they pull that. But anyway, Bob does this whole thing, and he produces this documentary, produces a book that sells 1 million copies or whatever, big release. And then I'm talking to him. I've interviewed him a number of times over the years. And in one of the interviews, I said, Bob, it's really strange. If it weren't for the location and all that kind of stuff, this is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Because it's the same thing. It's like they're waiting for it. There's all these cameras running. According to the story he was told, there was 4 cameras, 1 in the air in a helicopter. There's 3 on the ground. As this thing landed, they were filming this thing. And the beings get out of the craft. They're, met by officials and all this kind of stuff. And I said, it sounds just like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And Bob goes, what, I didn't tell you? I said, no, you didn't tell me what? I didn't tell you I gave a copy to Spielberg? And I go, no, you didn't tell me that. And he said, I told you. Annie Spielberg, Steven's sister, worked for us. She was a line producer for us. And she said, Steven wants a copy of the documentary. So he gives it to him in 1975. 1977, Close Encounters of the Third Kind comes out. And Bob told me that after Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out, Spielberg's mother came up to Bob and said, Bob, I've seen your version of Landing, and I've seen Steven's version of Landing, and I like Steven's version better. So you can see how they dropped.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I mean, Spielberg has had the tail of the tape when it comes to a couple things. If you think of E.T. as well.
Yeah. Well, another
and
story.
His conversation with Reagan.
A conversation with Reagan where Reagan said, there's only a handful of people in this room who know how true this whole thing is. And, there was a second story that Spielberg, before the thing had ended, that Spielberg was sitting beside him, where that's where he said 6 people in the room. So there's that. And then there's the bizarre story. It was told to me by a woman that did an interview with Spielberg's mother. She was doing a series. She's a professional writer, and she had done an interview with Spielberg's mother. And she said to me, you know that scene in Close Encounters of the Third Kind where E.T. The scene where E.T. is in the closet hiding among all the stuffed animals? And I said, yeah, I remember that. Said it's true. His mother told me that's a true story, which means that Spielberg is an experiencer. And so you hear these sort of things behind the scenes, and not much turns out to be accident after that. You sort of understand why things are in films, why people write certain lyrics in songs. I can almost tell, like now, and I did it the other day, I can sort of almost tell, like a movie, when there's something behind the movie that has been set up, or a download song. I can almost tell a song when I'm listening to a song. The only problem is I really don't know what the song is or what the band is or whatever. But I can tell when it's a download song. There was the one that was done. The latest one I did was the song with it was played for American Idol. Bad Day. It's a song whenever they got eliminated, they would play this Bad Day song, and I'm listening to it and I'm going, that's a download. That's got to be a download. And then I finally figured out what the song was called. And I went and checked, and sure enough, the guy said this tune was in his head. He couldn't get this tune out of his head or whatever. And at first it didn't take off, but it's just like one of the most biggest selling songs, the thing. So you can sort of sense this, that the beings are doing the same thing. They're putting this thing subconsciously. They're doing the same thing. They're not disclosing. They're not covering up. They're doing something in between. And both of them are doing the breadcrumb thing, where they're just dropping little bits and pieces, little hints, and they're getting you going. They do this next. Then you sort of lose interest, and then something weird happens and it gets you back into it. Something, you see a light in the backyard or some bizarre thing happens. And what they're doing, that's why I say when it comes to, especially to alien disclosure, why do alien ships, why do they have lights on them? So you can see them. We don't have any lights on our craft. Why would they have lights? They have lights so you can see them, and they're bizarre lights, and they're always different lights. Or they come almost like this Annie Strieber used to say that if it wasn't weird, it probably wasn't a true story. The weirder the story was, probably the more true it was. And that's what they're doing. The reason they do the weird stuff, I think, is not because it's weird, it's because they want you to remember it. They want you to think about it. They want you to go like, what the heck is going on? And they're just dragging you into this thing, and they're trying to make you think. To me, it's all messaging. When I look at the alien thing, and especially because I did this lecture a couple days ago, even the cow mutilation thing. Like, people always see the grossness of the cow mutilation, and I keep saying the only thing that interests me is, why did they drop the cow? Why? They've got the cow already. They've got it in the ship. They're out in outer space or something. They could drop it in the ocean. They could take it with them. They could do whatever. Why do you drop it back into the front yard of the guy? Because they know that Linda Howe is going to go take a picture of it and show it to everybody. That's what they want. It's a message. It's they're all connected to nuclear missiles and stuff like that. And so when you start looking at the UFO thing and saying, is this messaging? Like, if you're having an experience, what are they doing? Are they really doing something really weird to me, or why are they doing this weird thing? Or are they trying to get my attention and trying to move me down because I have something that I'm supposed to do?
Grant, we do this feature on this show called The Thought of the Dave, where every day we ask a question. I'd like to get your comments on a few of these, and I'm going to read some questions or some answers from our audience as well, if you don't mind.
Sure.
All right. Thought of the Dave coming up right now. Thought of the Dave happens every night at this time, where we put a question on our Facebook and Twitter, and then we read your answers on the air because we love the audience participation on this show. And the question today was, what is the biggest issue holding back disclosure and why? Grant, I'm going to give you first crack at this. What's the biggest issue holding back disclosure and why?
Scientific community, no doubt about it. Scientific community, because they believe in is dominated. They're the high priests of the modern world, and it's dominated by the materialistic paradigm, which means you can't get here from there. It's impossible. It's a random, meaningless universe, which means that aliens could not look like us. You can't have them being the same. Absolutely, without a doubt, scientific community is holding back disclosure.
Well, let's get to some of our audience. Zion says, the fear of the people coming forward with their experiences or information and being ridiculed for being the minority when in fact we are many, so we are disclosure. Does it come down to the people, Grant?
Yeah, well, that's the whole, she's basically giving the same answer I'm giving, is the reason that you don't is because the powerful people in science are afraid of being ridiculed. So it's basically the same thing, is that the people, you don't want to look like a crazy guy, and the high priests, the power people in modern world are scientific people, and you don't want to look unscientific. You don't want to be the woo-woo. That's what happened to me when I had to download. Everybody thought I had lost it because I'd gone to the other side, to the woo-woo side. I'm not into the nuts and bolts anymore, and a lot of people got upset about that.
Right. Tom says, just my opinion, but it is likely that someone somewhere is going to need to fess up that they have held this information back from the public. The questions will be relentless, and it will not be pretty for them. Wait until humanity finds out the technology that has been withheld and the lives of so many people could have been improved. That's a huge one, too. I mean, what are they hiding from the public? Cures for cancer?
Well, yeah, that is true, but it was sort of proved a little bit wrong in December, because the whole idea was once the government confirms that, yes, it's for real and they're studying this subject, everybody's going to go crazy. And what happened on December 16th, they did this confirmation thing. They basically said, yes, we are studying the phenomena. We don't know what's going on. It's very bizarre, and it may be a threat. And nobody jumped off any buildings. Nobody went crazy. They got away with it. They basically disclosed the fact that they're involved. There is a phenomena, and nothing really happened.
All right, let's get to Richard's comment. Things have gone on for so long and so much has happened under secrecy that even if they leaked one major item a day, every day, it would probably take 25 years to bring us up to speed. The information that they have and are using is in their interest, and disclosure would take away their power, their money, and complete control of us.
Absolutely. I mean, that's all true. Yeah, that you're no longer the big kahuna anymore. They're more powerful than us. And there's also another thing to add to that, is not only the secrets they're releasing that they know. Jim Semivant, who runs To the Stars, said the idea that you can measure this is laughable. How do you define something where there does not appear to be any there? This is got to do with consciousness. This has got to do multidimensionality beyond our present science. There's probably 95% of the material, they have no idea what's going on. Jimmy Semivant told one guy who confronted him, they're running the show. The idea that we understand this, I don't think we understand very much of what's going on at all. It is way more complex than people think it is. It's that's physical than people think, and I think it's going to be a lot more spiritual than people think, and very, very bizarre stuff. What you think, that's why I go along with Jacques Vallée, where I'll say I'll be very surprised if this just turns out to be extraterrestrials flying around in little tin cans.
For sure. Michael W. Hall, who you'll meet at our Paracon, he runs UFOI team out of Washington State. He says the deep state fears the massive blowback that is coming, and they are attempting to manage it, but they are running out of time. This also coincides with Charles's comment, which says global panic by fanatical groups is scary and could cause anarchy. I mean, there we have both sides of the ledger.
Yeah, well, there is, I mean, Lou Alessandro talked about this 2009. One of the reasons why the program was shut down was because of very strong religious sentiments inside. One of them is inside the CIA, that believe in the end of the world. They believe this is demons. We ain't going here. And so what you got to realize, people always say the government, and what you got to realize, it's like the U.S. Congress. There's no unified government. I mean, you have all these individual agencies all fighting for money. You have all sorts of different religious beliefs, all sorts of political beliefs, and it's not a unified government. There's all these interactions, people fighting inside the government as to what's going to be put out, how it's going to be put out, or whether it's even going to be put out.
Right. Let's get to Gail's comment. She says, perhaps the biggest issue is the aliens themselves. It seems if they had wanted to introduce or be introduced to Earth's citizenry, they would have made a public appearance. Since they haven't, they must prefer to remain as they are.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. They're doing the same thing as the government. They're not disclosing, because if they were to disclose, it'd land on the White House lawn and tell us what's going on. But they're not covering up either, because if they were to cover up, we know that with abductions, nobody sees anything. They can cloak themselves. You don't see them if they don't want to see you. When you see a UFO, you're part of the game. They want you to see them. So they're doing something in between. They're not covering up, and they're not disclosing. They're doing this little breadcrumb. They're making you think. They're dropping cows so people can see them. They're doing really weird stuff, and they're just making people think. That's why I say it's all messaging. When it comes to the aliens, it's all messaging. It's all talking to people, giving us concepts and stuff like that, and very, very weird stuff to keep our attention. So yeah, it's true. They're doing exactly the same thing as the government.
Right. Let's go to Twitter for a couple. Cheetah says, since recorded history, humans have always used positions of authority to overpower others for their own gain. The biggest issue preventing disclosure is us. We are allowing them to do it.
I guess she's referring to the government, I guess. Yeah, that's absolutely true. People are very easily led, extremely. I mean, even the last little while, I'm just kind of surprised where as stuff keeps going on, and people, if you take a look at it like a speech made by the U.S. president or something, you go out of that speech like a State of the Union address, and you listen, and like half the people heard one speech and half the people thought it meant suddenly something totally different. People are very easily manipulated, and that's part of the problem. And the government knows that, and they use it to their advantage.
I got an interesting one here, because every now and again I have someone following me who I just really haven't introduced myself to. A guy named Albert Dulworth. He says, it's the government's decision about disclosure and whether or not they don't want to disclose anything to change. When there is anything that they can use for themselves, they will. I am an aerospace machinist toolmaker for 40 years. I worked on many, many defense development programs, and many times directly hand in hand with the military. I had to early retire. He goes, I have hundreds of real photos of starcrafts or orbs from Arizona, USA, and I have photo analysis done and witnesses. I would see them nightly and sometimes daily above and around my home in Arizona. Now there's someone who potentially could be on the inside wanting to speak up.
But it sounds like he's seeing them. I don't think he's saying that he sort of handled the technology. It sounds more like he was inside. He does make a very valid point that there's a huge military-industrial complex there that works on a lot of stuff. So yeah, it's very true that there is a lot of insiders who know little bits and pieces that they really can't talk about.
Grant, thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio and going the distance. I look forward to returning the favor and coming on your show one day.
Yes, I hope to have you on, and I enjoy your story, and I was really amazed when I heard it, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with the people that follow me.
Thank you, my friend. And once again, Grant will be speaking at the Alien Cosmic Expo the weekend of the 23rd in Toronto, Ontario. Just Google Alien Cosmic Expo. You can get your tickets online. If you're on the East Coast or just needing a weekend away to travel, go to Toronto, Ontario. Stay away from the Blue Jays. We don't like them anyways, especially as Yankee fans. Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. The guitar god himself continues to rock us in and out Get your horns up for Mr. Bumblefoot, as he takes good musical care of us here. Tomorrow night on the program, we have Victor Vigiani coming in. We're going to be talking about Canada's role in disclosure. What is it? Does it even exist? 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time at spacedoutradio.com. I want to say a big shout out, thank you to everybody listening at home, in your cars, at work, wherever you may be. Also, a special thank you to everybody in the chat rooms tonight on Twitter at hashtag spacedoutradio. In the Spreaker chat room, you guys were amazing tonight. On Periscope, thanks for all the great comments. The new computer is coming, so that little stuttering will stop pretty soon. And of course, the veterans in the SOR Space Travelers Club, you guys are amazing. Thank you for sharing the show. Thank you for making us bigger every single night, because together, my friends, we own the night. I will talk to you in 21 hours from now. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Have a good one. Talk to you tomorrow night. Good night. All right, Grant.